Chapter 1008. Shi Yao. Where did you inherit such a proud and arrogant personality from? Shi Yao, then where did your snacks come from? Lin Shi's eyebrows shot up proudly as he replied, my mother-in-law gave them to me. Lin Shi's reply nearly caused Shi Yao to fall to the ground. Little Snack liked to watch videos on the internet and had a good memory, so he had a photographic memory of many things. Then he would say a string of things, shocking the adults in the family until they were speechless. Thinking that it was some kind of joke, Shi Yao asked, tell me, where did you learn that joke from? Seeing that his mother didn't believe him, little Lin Shi immediately put on a stern expression and gazed at Shi Yao with a serious expression. With a childish voice he said, Mommy, it's not a joke. It's the truth. My snacks were all given to me by my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law really likes them. Do you know what mother-in-law means? I do. It's my wife's mother. Shi Yao. Oh no. The person before me isn't a 3.5-year-old son but a 30-year-old son, right? Before Shi Yao could calm herself down and speak, little Lin Shi continued, Mommy, I know what you're going to ask next. Do you know what a wife is? I do. A wife is a grandmother to a grandfather, a mother to a father, a great-aunt to a young master and a great-aunt to Uncle Xia. Great-aunt to Uncle Xia. Sis Joey to Xia Shangzhou? Shi Yao couldn't help but burst into laughter. Little Snack, you're right at the start but you're wrong at the end. There's no relationship between your great-aunt and your Uncle Xia, so don't try to matchmake them. Mommy, what do you mean by matchmaking them? It means that people who aren't husband and wife are forced to be husband and wife by you. As she spoke, Shi Yao realized that her son had diverted the topic, so she quickly returned to the main topic. Little Snack, I'm not here to discuss this with you. I'm asking about your snacks. Mommy, why don't you believe me? They were really given to me by my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law really likes me. The first day she met me, she gave me all of the snacks in her bag. She even told me that if I were to be disfigured, she would betroth Kiki to me, and I agreed to it. So, Mommy, you must remember that I'm different from my aunt. I'm no longer a single dog. Please don't drag me into it when you talk about my aunt in the future. Look at you, Lin Jia, you're not even married yet. You only have Lin Shi as a single dog at home. Shi Yao. I feel like beating my son. What should I do? Shi Yao. Even if Kiki's mother likes you, there's no need for her to give you snacks every day, is there? Hearing those words, Lin Shi also felt that it made sense. He tilted his head to the side and pondered for a moment, but he still couldn't make sense of it. I'll ask my mother-in-law why she's treating me so well when I meet her tomorrow. But Mommy, Kiki doesn't have a father, so I want to give my father to Kiki to be her father. Hearing those words, Shi Yao's heart nearly stopped beating. He's her husband. What right does he have to make such a decision? What do you mean by giving Kiki to be her father? Suppressing the urge to throw Lin Shi out, Shi Yao continued listening to her son's words. Also, Mommy, I've noticed a very strange problem. Kiki's mother has the same surname as Kiki, so why do I have the same surname as Daddy? I want to have the same surname as Mommy too. Also, Kiki's mother's name doesn't make sense. Her name is Leng Nguan, so how can she be Nguan and Nguan be Leng? Chapter 1009. Also, Kiki's mother's name doesn't make sense. He's called Leng Nguan. How can she be called Nguan when she's cold, and how can she be called Leng when she's warm? Leng Nguan. Upon hearing this oddly familiar name, Shi Yao's expression suddenly froze. She didn't even pay attention to what little Lin Shi was mumbling to himself after that. Lingwan. Lingwan. These two words, she would always bring them up whenever she chatted with Jiang Yu and He Tiantian. Without waiting for little Lin Shi to finish his words, Shi Yao suddenly rushed up to her son, squatted down and looked him in the eye before asking once more, Snack, what did you just say? What's the name of Kiki's mother? Lingwan. Kiki told me about it. As little Lin Shi spoke, he picked up a bag of snacks by the bedside and stuffed it into his mouth. Right, Mommy, Kiki's mother asked me about your name too. She even asked me if you're good, and when I told her that you're good, she smiled and said something along the lines of as long as you're good. Xiao Lin's casual words caused Shi Yao's fingertips to tremble slightly. She reached out to grab a few snacks from her son's hands and stuffed them into his mouth before asking, other than what Kiki's mother said to you, what else did you say to her? Have you told her about our family's situation? Mommy, I told Kiki's mother that you're a teacher and that Daddy runs his own company. I also told her that great-grandpa, 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 great-aunt, 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 and great-aunt all work in the company Grandpa founded. After hearing those words, Shi Yao's fingertips trembled even more violently. There were countless names in the world, and it was inevitable that there would be many people with the same name. However, she was certain that the Leng Yuan her son was talking about was the Leng Yuan she was looking for. Nuanyuan must have recognized him after hearing Snack's words, and that was why she asked him who his mother was. Most likely, it was because she knew that Lin Shi was her son that Nuanyuan would give him snacks every day. In order to prove her conjecture, she asked, "Snack, were you the one who told Keek's mother about our family situation first before she asked you who I am?" How could Lin Shi possibly know what Shi Yao was plotting? Hearing her question, he immediately recalled that Shi Yao had warned him not to speak of his family's situation to others. Thinking that his mother was trying to settle the score with him, he immediately lowered his head and admitted his mistake obediently. "Mom, I was wrong. I was just trying to leave a good impression on Keek's mother, so I accidentally spilled the beans. I know that I shouldn't have said such things to strangers, but I won't do it again." It's really Nuanyuan. It's been 4 years since she left without saying goodbye on the day of her wedding. I finally found her. Shi Yao's heart suddenly started beating furiously. Seeing that his mother wasn't saying a word, little Lin Shi rolled his eyes and admitted his mistake once more. Not forgetting to defend himself, he said, "Mom, I was really wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Mom, Keek's mother is my mother-in-law now, so she's not a stranger anymore. Please don't be angry anymore." Shi Yao, who wasn't listening to Lin Shi's words at all, waited for her emotions to calm down before reaching out to touch her son's face. "Snack, I'll send you to kindergarten tomorrow morning." Chapter 10:10. He did something wrong, but not only did his mother not reprimand him, she even insisted on sending him to kindergarten and kissing him. Could there be some kind of conspiracy behind all of this? Little Lin Shi rolled his dark eyes around. Determined to appear more obedient, he immediately said, "Mommy, I'm going to take a bath. I'll wash my socks on my own. I don't need you to read me a bedtime story today, I can sleep on my own. Also, I thought about my phone and I don't think it's good for my eyes, so I won't look at it anymore." As she spoke, Kobayashi flipped over and rolled from the bed to the floor. Then she got up and slipped into the bathroom. Watching little Snack's adorable back as he fled, Shi Yao couldn't help but chuckle. He was such a bootlicker and his survival instincts were off the charts as well. Soft. Cowardly. Early the next morning, Shi Yao pulled Kobayashi out of bed. Throughout the entire process of Shi Yao helping Kobayashi wash up and get dressed, little Snack's eyes remained glued to the bed. The kindergarten started at 8, and before it was even 6, Shi Yao had already stuffed little Snack into the car and headed to the kindergarten. Little Lin Shi was the only child in the kindergarten, and Shi Yao couldn't care less about how pitiful he looked being left alone in the classroom. She shoved him into the hands of the principal and left. However, Shi Yao didn't really leave. Instead, she found a spot slightly further away and sat in the car, staring at the entrance of the kindergarten. About 45 minutes later, parents came to send their children into the park one after another. Shi Yao stared intently at the parents lining up at the entrance, afraid that she would miss a single one of them. At around 7:45 minutes, she saw a familiar figure carrying a little girl off the bus and rushing toward the entrance of the kindergarten. Even though it had been many years since they last met, even though she could only see their backs, and even though everyone had changed their hairstyles and dressing styles over the years, Shi Yao could still tell with a single glance that it was the Leng Yuan she was looking for. Earlier that morning, the auntie was feeling a little unwell. After waking up, Leng Yuan first prepared breakfast for Kiki before heading to the nearby pharmacy to buy some medicine for the auntie. After returning, she fed Kiki breakfast and sent her off to the kindergarten 20 minutes later than usual. She was afraid that if she took a taxi, the traffic would be so bad that she would be late for work after dropping off Kiki, so she took the bus instead. Since it was the morning rush hour, there were a lot of people on the bus and it was extremely crowded. She had to take care of Kiki and steady herself at the same time, so when she got off the bus she was already sweating. When they arrived at the bus stop in the vicinity of the kindergarten, Leng Yuan got off the bus. Seeing that they were already in a rush, she quickly picked Kiki up and ran toward the entrance of the kindergarten. After handing Kiki over to the principal, even though Leng Yuan was in a hurry to get to work, she still patiently bent down to wave goodbye to Kiki. After Kiki entered the kindergarten, she turned around and walked toward the side of the road. She wanted to hail a taxi to go to the company, but just as she reached the roadside before she could stand still, someone called her name from behind. Wan Wan. That familiar voice, that familiar tone. It was as if someone had struck Ling Wan's acupoints, causing her to freeze on the spot. After about a minute she heard her name again. Wan Wan. Before Ling Wan could even turn around, her eyes had already reddened. Chapter 10-11. In the instant that Ling Wan and Shi Yao's gazes met, both of them could see tears welling up in the depths of the other's eyes. Neither of them had any intention of saying a word. They simply stared at one another quietly. As they stared at one another, a stream of tears suddenly fell from the corner of Shi Yao's eyes. Feeling the moisture on her cheeks, Shi Yao subconsciously curled up her lips. In the instant that she smiled, Ling Wan lowered her gaze and smiled as well. At the same time, tears also fell from the corner of Shi Yao's eyes. Finally, Ling Wan got into Shi Yao's car. She sat beside her in the car for a long time and both of their eyes were still red. Yao Yao, Wan Wan. Both of them spoke at the same time, but after hearing the other's voice they fell silent. It was very quiet in the car. After about 10 seconds, the two of them moved their lips again as if they had agreed to it beforehand. Wan Wan, Yao Yao. Both of them paused for a moment. Both of them thought that if this went on, they would probably sit for the entire morning without saying anything. Thus they immediately followed suit. You first, you first. For the third time in a row, Shi Yao and Ling Wan spoke at the same rhythm, and the two of them couldn't help but chuckle at the chemistry between them. But this time Shi Yao didn't say a word. Ling Wan waited for a moment and she knew that Shi Yao was using her silence to tell her to speak first. Thus she moved her lips and finally managed to complete her sentence. Yao Yao, how have you been all these years? Hearing those simple words, Shi Yao's eyes reddened once more. What do people look forward to the most when they're apart? Nothing more than for her to appear before you one day and ask you with her own mouth. How have you been? Look at you. How old are you? Your child is already so big yet you're still crying. Ling Wan teased Shi Yao, but her eyes were even redder and redder than Shi Yao's. You have the cheek to talk about me? Look at yourself, aren't you still the same? You're still crying. Shi Yao retorted bluntly. Her tone and expression were reminiscent of when they were still in university. With just a single glance, Ling Wan couldn't help but tear up once more. As she wiped her nose, she said, I'm fine. I just really miss you. I'm afraid that you're not doing well and I'm afraid that you'll be bullied by others. You're really too much. You didn't even tell us what happened and just left without saying a word. Do you know how long we've been searching for you after you left? There were so many gatherings we had, and that silly Tian Tian couldn't hold her liquor, but she still insisted on drinking. Every time she got herself drunk she would call out your name. Back then we promised that we'd be together after graduation, so how could you go back on your words? You left without even leaving us a single message. Also Jiang Yu. Every time she went out to play, just like in university, she would return with a gift. Even though she couldn't find you, she would always buy 4 of them. Chapter 10-12. Wan Wan, I'm telling you right now, I really don't want to forgive you. Shi Yao grumbled through gritted teeth a second ago, but in the next second she grabbed Ling Wan's hand as if afraid that the latter would disappear at any moment. Wan Wan, just this once. Just this once, alright? Shi Yao's gentle tone made the tears in Ling Wan's eyes flow even more fiercely. Yao Yao, I didn't do it on purpose. I know everything, but we were just worried about you. We were afraid that you wouldn't have anyone to talk to when you went to work alone. We were afraid that you wouldn't be able to find someone to talk to when you got home from work. We were afraid that you wouldn't be able to eat your fill. However, it's all in the past now. You won't be alone anymore. If you're sad, happy, or want to eat, you can look for me. If you think that I'm not enough, I can bring my entire family to accompany you as long as you don't mind the 2 of us. We were afraid that you wouldn't be able to eat your fill. Hearing these familiar words, Ling Wan couldn't help but feel nostalgic. Shi Yao, it's been so many years, but you're still the same. Ling Wan tried her best to sound as relaxed as possible. Where are Tian Tian and Yaya? Are they doing well? What are they doing? Tian Tian opened a flower shop, and Yaya managed to become the team leader in the company. Right, Tian Tian got married to Desolate Year 2 years ago. Not too long ago Tian got pregnant and she's currently vomiting terribly. Every day she would complain in the group chat that she's going for an abortion. If she knew that I've seen you she'd definitely be overjoyed. Also, Liang Jusi and Yaya are nearing their wedding and their story is a little complicated. Liang Jusi was going to marry a woman of equal status, and the marriage was already set. However, Yaya thought that he had always treated her as a brother, so she didn't make her feelings clear. Thus they went on a blind date, but Liang Jusi was unhappy about it. Taking advantage of his position as Yaya's boss, he would cause all sorts of trouble whenever Yaya went on a blind date. In the end the two of them ended up together. At the start of this year, Liang Jusi called off the engagement and because of this he was even beaten up by his father. Hearing Shi Yao's words, a hint of a smile surfaced on Leng Wan's face. It was really good. From the naive school days to the present, everyone had a home to return to. It was really good. Seeing Leng Wan smile, Shi Yao stopped nagging and turned to Leng Wan. Wan, can you stop asking about us? What about you? How are you? Even without Leng Wan's reply, Shi Yao could tell that Leng Wan must have been very tired over the years. Coco was her daughter and she had taken on her surname. She didn't even know who her father was. This was clearly a single-parent family. Shi Yao had a child of her own, so she knew just how tough it was for a mother from pregnancy to birth to breastfeeding and so on. Even she found it hard to have her entire family helping her, acting as a nanny and taking care of her, let alone Leng Wan. Just this thought alone was enough to make Shi Yao's heart ache. Before Leng Wan could speak she spoke up once more. It must have been hard on you over the past few years, right? It must be hard to raise a child alone, right? Tell me, are you stupid? Chapter 10:13. Even though Shi Yao didn't say his name, Leng Wan knew who she was referring to. Her lips moved, wanting to say something, but in the end she didn't say anything. You're really a fool. Tell me, if you don't want him as a person, why do you still want his child? Leng Wan didn't say a word. After a moment of silence, Shi Yao spoke up. Wan, have you ever thought about the future? It's not the same as having a father. All these years he hasn't found a girlfriend either and he's been waiting for you. After you left, Tian, Yaya and I all hold a grudge against him. When we first met none of us cared about him. Later on when we did we would often criticize him but he never fell out with us. No matter how you look at it he thinks that he deserves it. Since you're willing to bear his child, it goes without saying that you have him in your heart as well. Yao. Leng Wan didn't know what she was afraid of, but she suddenly interrupted Shi Yao, not daring to let her continue. Yao, I'm living a good life now. Even though it's tough and tiring to raise a child alone, I've managed to get through the most difficult and tiring times. Kiki is getting bigger and bigger and I'm getting less and less worried. I really think that my current situation is pretty good. I don't want to think about anything else. Thinking back to how he had mysteriously disappeared from her world 4 years ago, how he had ignored her calls and texts. When she had personally gone to the company to look for him, all she got in return was an excuse that he was on a business trip. A hint of darkness flashed across Leng Wan's eyes. She had always been afraid of all men in the world. When she was at her most extreme she couldn't even communicate with a man in the most basic way. It was precisely because of this that she put on a different face to women and a different face to men. She believed in love, but she didn't believe that beautiful love would ever appear on her again. It was only when he appeared in her world that she gradually became willing to accept a man, that she was willing to walk out of her past and start a new life. She thought that she would slowly get better, but in the end, the result she received was just her wishful thinking. There are 80,000 Chinese characters in the world, but the word love is the most hurtful. With such thoughts in mind, Leng Wan spoke up once more. I really don't want to change the current situation anymore. Yao, I appreciate your goodwill, but I don't want to put myself in danger anymore. Leng Wan paused for a moment before continuing. Yao, you can meet me, Tian can meet me, Yaya can meet me, and even Lin Jierge can meet me, but I don't want to meet him. By the time Lu Benlai returned from his business trip, a week had already passed. When he was on a business trip he passed by a toy store and saw the toy that Lin Shi had been clamoring to buy but had been out of stock, so he bought it and brought it back for Lin Shi. By the time he arrived at Beijing airport, it was only 3 in the afternoon. Since he didn't need to return to the company he didn't have anything else to do. Thus, after the chauffeur picked him up, he noticed the toys he had bought for Lin Sher on the way back to the city, and on a whim he had the chauffeur change the route to Lin Jier's house. Lu Benlai knew the password to Lin Jier's private elevator, so he made his way up without any obstructions. He pressed the doorbell and roughly 30 seconds later footsteps sounded from within. As the door opened, the first person to rush out was a short and adorable little girl. Chapter 10:14. He pressed the doorbell and roughly 30 seconds later footsteps sounded from within. The door opened and an adorable little girl dashed out. The little girl was dressed in a pink princess dress, and her hair was combed into 2 ponytails. She ran up to Lu Benlai before finally stopping to assess him. With just a single glance, Lu Benlai immediately recognized the little girl to be the lost little girl he had met in Ji University back then. But why would she be in Lin Jierj and Shi Yao's house? While Lu Benlai was perplexed, little Lin Sher also ran out. Little Lin Sher wasn't a very attentive person in front of Lu Benlai, but when he saw his favorite toy in Lu Benlai's hands, he immediately greeted him obediently. "Hello, Uncle Lu." Lin Sher's childish voice pulled Lu Benlai back to his senses. He bowed down to greet Lin Sher before turning his gaze back to the little girl. For some reason, whenever he saw the little girl, he would feel an inexplicable surge of fatherly love, such that his voice was much gentler and more amiable than when he spoke to Lin Sher. "Do you still remember your uncle?" The little girl nodded silently. Seeing this sight, Lin Sher immediately grew wary. "Uncle Lu, how do you know Kiki?" "Uncle Lu, Kik's mother has already betrothed her to me." Hearing little Snack's words, Lu Benlai burst into laughter. "Is he afraid that I'll snatch Kiki away from him?" Seeing that Lu Benlai wasn't saying a word, Lin Sher grew agitated. "Uncle Lu, a gentleman doesn't snatch what others like. I just learned these words this morning." "You're not a gentleman, Lu Benlai." Of all the children in the world, Lin Jierj's son was the only one who behaved like that. If every child was like that, there would probably be no one who would be willing to bear children anymore. Lin Sher. "Uncle Lu." Seeing that Lin Sher was getting angry, Lu Benlai hurriedly stopped teasing him and said, "I was the one who found her when she got lost and brought her home." After hearing the explanation, Lin Sher immediately calmed down and said, "I'll thank you on Kik's behalf then." Lu Benlai. "Are you being serious with that tone and attitude of a little boyfriend?" "Uncle Lu, I didn't expect you to have such a valiant and helpful side to you." Lu Benlai. "Are you praising me or are you mocking me? Like father, like son." In order to shut Lin Sher up, Lu Benlai passed the gift in his hand over to him and said, "This is what you've been looking for. I happened to see it, so I specially brought it back for you." "Thank you, Uncle Lu." When Lin Sher received the gift with both hands, Lung Kiki, who was standing by the side, watched as the gift passed from Lu Benlai's hands to Lin Sher. Then her large black eyes turned back to Lu Benlai, and she stared at him expectantly. Judging from her expression, did she think that he had a present too after seeing him give little Snack a present and was waiting for him? Lu Benlai, who didn't know that a little girl would be in Lin Jierj's house, was at a loss as to what to do. However, he didn't want to disappoint the little girl, so he reached into his pocket and rummaged through his briefcase. Eventually, he found a piece of chocolate and passed it to the little girl, saying, "This is for you." Chapter 10:15. It was a very soft and gentle touch, but it made Lu Benlai's heart soften to the extreme. All of a sudden he felt an urge to hug this little girl. Compared to the 2 little ones, Lin Jierj appeared at the door a little later. "What are you doing here?" In his hands were 2 milk bottles, one light blue and the other light pink. Clearly they were filled with milk for the 2 little ones. However, what shocked Lu Benlai wasn't the milk bottles in Lin Jierj's hands but the fact that he was wearing a Pikachu suit. If not for his voice, Lu Benlai really wouldn't have been able to tell who the person before him was. Even though Lu Benlai wasn't saying a word, Lin Jierj could tell what he was thinking just by looking at his expression. He didn't want to do this either, but since the 2 little ones liked him and Soft Bun was willing to do this for them, he couldn't possibly turn her down. With a milk bottle in hand, Lin Jierj opened the door for Lu Benlai and the 2 little ones to enter. Lin Jierj first passed the light blue milk bottle to Lin Sher before passing the light pink milk bottle to Coco. Coco was holding a piece of chocolate in her hand, so she took the milk bottle with her arm. She even tilted her head up to Lin Jierj and said in a cute voice, "Thank you, Uncle Pikachu." Lin Jiege used the paw of the Pikachu suit to gently stroke Coco's face, causing her to giggle. Then he turned to look at his son, only to see that he had tossed the milk bottle to the side and was tearing open the present Lu Benlai had given him. Without any hesitation he used the paw of the Pikachu suit to give his son a slap. A slap. Lin Shi hurriedly tossed aside his toy and picked up the milk bottle. While drinking the milk he would lean against Lin Jiege and raise his head from time to time to call out, "Daddy," before talking to Lin Jiege. While Lin Jiege was entertaining his son he chatted with Lu Benlai. This little girl is Lin Shi's classmate, and her name is Kiki. As Lin Jiege spoke he shot a glance at Shi Yao who was currently cutting fruit plates for the two little ones in the dining room. After which he turned to Lu Benlai and said, "Her mother is away on a business trip, so there's no one to take care of Kiki. As she's close to Lin Shi, Yao Yao brought her back." Lin Jiege intentionally emphasized on the word Yao, but seeing that there wasn't much of a change in Lu Benlai's expression, he couldn't help but recall how Soft Bun had warned him not to tell Lu Benlai about his encounter with Lung Nuan. Thus he could only give Lu Benlai a new reminder. "Kiki is called Lung Kiki? So she's the Lung Kiki that Snack mentioned to me before?" As Lu Benlai spoke he lowered his head to look at Kiki, only to see that she had dripped milk on her clothes. He quickly picked up a napkin and wiped her collar. Lin Jiege was rendered speechless by Lu Benlai's reply. Unfortunately, Pikachu had concealed his expression, so Lu Benlai couldn't see through his anxiety at all. Clearing his throat, Lin Jiege was just about to say something when Shi Yao walked out of the dining room with a fruit plate in her hands. Frightened, he quickly shut his mouth and lowered his head to talk to Lin Shi. Hugging the milk bottle, Lung Kiki stared fixedly at the scene of Lin Jiege and Lin Shi. "Daddy, can you help me assemble the toy later? Daddy, I'm already full. Can I not drink the rest? Daddy." Chapter 10:16. Lu Benlai was currently speaking to Lin Jiege and Shi Yao who was seated beside Lin Jiege, would occasionally interject. Lung Kiki's daddy was very soft, but the adults in the room instantly fell silent. This was the first time someone had called Lu Benlai daddy, and it wasn't his daughter at that. He was stunned as he stared at Lung Kiki, not knowing how he should react. Lung Kiki raised her head and stared at Lu Benlai for a moment. Seeing that the latter wasn't responding to her, she imitated Lin Shi's tone and called out, "Daddy, daddy, daddy." Lung Kiki's voice grew louder and louder. Lu Benlai felt as if something was stuck in his throat, causing him to choke on his words. His lips moved, and it took him a great deal of effort before he managed to force out a few words. "Kiki, I'm not your father." Lung Kiki only wanted someone to call Lin Shi daddy, and other than Lin Jiege, Lu Benlai was the only other person in the room, so she wanted to call him daddy too. Ever since she was young, no one had ever told her what a father was, so she didn't really understand what the words "I'm not your father" meant. However, she could vaguely tell that Lu Benlai was rejecting her. Her eyes reddened, but she still called out in a tender voice, "Daddy, daddy." Looking at Kiki in such a state, Shi Yao's eyes reddened in an instant. Indeed, she was still young and there were many things she didn't understand. But just because she didn't understand didn't mean that she didn't need it. Perhaps she didn't know what a daddy was in the past, so she didn't have any need for one. However, after seeing the interaction between Lin Shi and Lin Jiege, she also wanted a daddy. It was just that she had promised Lung Nuan that she wouldn't tell Lu Benlai about their meeting, so there was no way she could tell Lu Benlai that Kiki was his daughter. After all, feelings couldn't be forced. Even if Nuan didn't want to return to the past, she couldn't just turn around and sell her away. But in the end, Shi Yao still couldn't bring herself to do it. So just as Lu Benlai was about to reject Kiki, she spoke up. "Kiki doesn't have a daddy, so you should just respond to her when she calls you daddy." Hearing Shi Yao's words, Lu Benlai, who was just about to reason with Lung Kiki that she shouldn't call another man daddy so casually, swallowed back the words that were on the tip of his tongue. In truth, he really couldn't bring himself to turn down this little girl, but he wasn't her father in the first place, so he couldn't just agree to her request. Hearing Shi Yao's words, he couldn't help but mutter an AI toward Kiki's voice, which was still calling her father. Coco immediately smiled. Recalling how Lin Jiege had fed Lin Shi milk when he didn't want to drink it, she passed the milk bottle in her hand over to Lu Benlai. Lu Benlai didn't really understand what Kiki was trying to say. It was only when Kiki said in a cute voice, "Daddy, daddy, daddy," that he hurriedly took the milk bottle and fed it to her. This was his first time feeding a child milk. He was a little nervous and his movements were stiff, but Coco seemed to be very happy. However, Coco only drank 2 mouthfuls before turning her head away and stretching her arms toward Lu Benlai. Even without Keek's reminder, Lu Benlai already knew that she wanted him to carry her. He reached out and easily pulled Kiki into his embrace. Chapter 10:17. Lu Benlai wasn't carrying the child, and with a little bun nestled in his embrace, he didn't dare to move at all for fear of startling Kiki. Perhaps Kiki was still a little shy with strangers, but she behaved obediently in Lu Benlai's embrace. However, as time went by, perhaps feeling that she was getting closer to Lu Benlai, Kiki grew bolder and bolder, and she began squirming around in Lu Benlai's embrace. Lu Benlai didn't mind her messing around. Throughout the entire process, he looked at Kiki with a gentle gaze. Every time Kiki was about to fall, he would always be there to protect her. Lu Benlai didn't intend to stay in Lin Jier's house for too long, but due to Kiki clinging onto him, Shi Yao decided to ask him to stay for dinner. He also wanted to spend a little more time with Kiki, so he agreed to it. Throughout dinner, Kiki relied heavily on Lu Benlai. She wanted him to feed her, take food from her bowl and wipe her mouth. Speaking of which, it was strange. Not only did Lu Benlai not find it troublesome, he even took good care of Kiki. From the initial fluster, he eventually became more like a nanny. After dinner, Lu Benlai played with Kiki for a while before Shi Yao took Kiki to the bathroom. When she came out, Kiki was dressed in a set of pink pajamas. Her soft hair hung loosely behind her back, making her look like a doll. It was about time for the 2 children to go to sleep, but Kiki refused to do so. She insisted on pestering Lu Benlai to tell her a story. Lu Benlai hugged her tirelessly as he read Snow White over and over again. Lu Benlai had no idea how long he had been reading the story, but when his mouth went dry, he lowered his head and saw that Kiki had already fallen asleep in his embrace. The little girl's face was flushed red from her sleep, making her look adorable. As Lu Benlai continued reading, he was so entranced that he didn't even realize that a warm smile had curled up on his lips. Lu Benlai was a little reluctant to let go of Kiki, so he sat quietly in her embrace for a long while. It was only when Shi Yao came over to check if Kiki had fallen asleep that he reluctantly placed her on the crib and carefully covered her with a blanket before getting up to leave the bedroom. It was already getting late, so Lu Benlai didn't stay any longer. After bidding farewell to Lin Jierj and Shi Yao, he quickly took his leave. A second after Lu Benlai left the room, Shi Yao immediately picked up her phone and called Leng Wan, who had called her several times tonight, but she didn't pick up. The call was picked up immediately. After confirming that everything was fine, Leng Wan finally heaved a sigh of relief. Shi Yao chatted with Leng Wan for a while longer, and before Leng Wan hung up the call, Shi Yao hesitated for a moment before mentioning Lu Benlai. Wan, he came to our house today and he bumped into Kiki. On the other end of the phone, Leng Wan fell silent. Kiki probably saw that Snack had a father, so she wanted a father too, so she called him Daddy. He was quite patient and he played with Kiki for a very long time. He was the one who coaxed Kiki to sleep at night. The reason why I didn't pick up your call back then was because he was around. Yao, it's getting late, you should rest early, I still have a meeting tomorrow morning. Chapter 10:18. Holding onto her phone, Shi Yao leaned against the headboard and fell into deep thought for a moment. Eventually, she opened up her phone's photo gallery and selected a few photos she had taken of Lu Benlai accompanying Kiki before sending them over to Leng Wan's WeChat. After sending the photos, Shi Yao didn't say anything and Leng Wan didn't reply either. However, Shi Yao knew that Leng Wan would definitely see them. The photos she had sent over were hilariously bright, and Leng Wan looked even happier than usual. Shi Yao admitted that she had done it on purpose. After all, she was a mother and she understood a mother's heart better than anyone else. Leng Wan would surely want her daughter to be happier, and she hoped that Leng Wan's unshakable resistance toward Lu Benlai would waver a little. Speaking of which, Lu Benlai had never thought that a 3-year-old girl would leave such a deep impression on him. For an entire week he would think of her whenever his mind wandered off. But in the end she wasn't his daughter. No matter how much he thought about her, he couldn't bring her home and raise her. Lu Benlai knew very well that he wouldn't have much interaction with that little girl in the future. Or rather, after parting ways at Lin Jierj's place, There was a good chance that he would no longer have any contact with that little girl. But no matter how aware he was of that fact, he still did quite a few things that bewitched him. When he went to the supermarket to buy some daily necessities, he saw beautiful women's clothing hanging in the window of the mall above and even bought a few sets. While he was browsing the internet in boredom at work, he even went to look at the little girl's plush toys. In the blink of an eye, it was the weekend again. Lu Benlai caught a slight cold, so he stayed at home to catch up on his sleep. He ate takeaway for dinner, and after filling his stomach he took out some medicine and gulped it down before falling into a deep sleep once more. After sleeping for a long time, he was awoken by his phone ringing. He took a look at the caller ID and saw that it was ... It was Keek's mother's phone number. Back then, when he received the cufflinks, he had thought of deleting the little girl's mother's phone number, but he felt that something was amiss. After some thought, he decided to save it instead. Since he didn't know the other party's name, he simply typed a question mark. But why was the little girl's mother calling him? Lu Benlai was perplexed, but he still picked up the call. It wasn't the little girl's mother's voice, but the little girl's. Hello? Would you like to order takeout? Hearing the serious voice of the little girl, Lu Benlai's vexed mood suddenly lightened up. The little girl was probably playing games by herself, playing house with her mother's phone, and accidentally called him. With such a thought in mind, Lu Benlai played along with Kiki and said, "Yes, Kiki. I want to order takeout. May I know what kind of takeout you can sell to me?" There was no sound from the other side of the phone. After about 10 seconds, Coco seemed to have recognized him from his voice. She suddenly stopped playing the food delivery game and started calling out, "Daddy, Daddy." "Kiki, what are you yelling about?" As soon as the voice came from Coco's side, Lu Benlai felt as if someone had smashed a bat into his head, pinning him to the bed. "Kiki, it's your fault for tapping on my phone again." Chapter 10:19. Kiki, who told you to use mommy's phone again? Kiki? Mommy? Lu Benlai felt as if his brain had crashed and he couldn't think at all. The conversation on the other end of the phone was still going on. Kiki, who was being lectured, began to whine coquettishly, "Mommy is beautiful, mommy is good. Mommy. Daddy. Daddy. Kiki, that's a phone, not daddy. If you want to play games again, use your toy phone instead of mommy's phone." Through the phone, Lu Benlai could hear the sound of approaching footsteps. He was clearly separated from the other party by an internet connection, but Lu Benlai's heart still skipped a beat along with the approaching footsteps. "Kiki, give your phone to mommy." "No, I want daddy, daddy." "Kiki." Due to Keek's disobedience, the other party's tone became much harsher. "Daddy." Following Keek's aggrieved voice, the other party spoke up once more. "Kiki, who did you call?" Perhaps sensing that Kiki had made the call, the other party took the phone away. Without the phone, Kiki burst into tears, but the other party didn't show any signs of coaxing Kiki. She didn't speak and he didn't speak either. Other than Keek's sobs, there was no other sound. After an unknown period of time, Lu Benlai finally recovered from his daze. His mouth opened and closed, and as if afraid that everything was just a dream, his voice became so soft that it seemed as if he was muttering, "Wan, Wan." As those two words left his mouth, his fingers, which were holding onto the phone, began to tremble violently. She still didn't speak. He spoke again impatiently, and this time his voice trembled even more intensely. "Wan, Wan, Wan." He called out her name a second time, but before he could finish, the call was cut off. Hearing the busy tone on the other end of the phone, he was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly dialed the number back. However, as soon as the call connected, the call was cut off. He tried calling again, but the reply he got was, "Sorry, the number you have dialed is currently busy." He knew that she must have blacklisted his number. Unwilling to give up, he tried calling again, but the same thing still didn't happen. Finally, he tossed the phone to the side. There was no way he could be mistaken. The person who had spoken earlier was definitely Lung Wan. Because that voice was all too familiar to him. How many times had he dreamed of her voice in the middle of the night? She told Kiki that she was Keek's mother. Pinky. Lung Wan, her mother went on a business trip, so there was no one to take care of Kiki. Since she and Lin Shi are close, Yao Yao brought her back. Cuckoo is called Lung Ku. The words that Lin Jierge had told him the other day suddenly flashed across his mind. As it turned out, Lin Jierge had already been hinting to him that day. He must have had a screw loose in his head for not noticing the other party's intentions. Yes, did he even need to think about it? Chapter 10:20. Coco was only a little over 3 years old, which meant that she was 4 months younger than Little Snack. On the night that he slept with her, Little Snack had been in his mother's womb for 4 months. The timing was definitely correct. With such thoughts in mind, Lu Benlai tossed aside his blanket and rushed into the changing room. It didn't take him long to change into a new set of clothes, grab his phone and car keys from the bed and rush out of the house. The journey from where he lived to Lin Jier's house should have taken around 20 minutes, but it only took him 13 minutes to reach the parking lot below Lin Jier's house. Taking the elevator up, he didn't even press the doorbell. Instead, he stretched out his hand and began knocking on the door. Roughly 10 seconds later, a response sounded from behind the door, but to him, every second felt incomparably long. He continued knocking on the door anxiously. Hurried footsteps sounded from the doorway and the door was pulled open. Today Lin Jiege was no longer a Pikachu but a big yellow duck, and the big yellow duck was even clutching a diaper in its claws. Faced with such a comical sight, Lu Benlai didn't have the slightest hint of admiration or mockery. Instead, he stared at the duck head on Lin Jiege's head and went straight to the point. "You and Shuyao met her, didn't you?" "What?" Lin Jiege couldn't figure out who the chic Lu Benlai was referring to was, so he asked in bewilderment. "Say, you and Shuyao met her a long time ago, didn't you? You knew that Ling Wan was in Beijing, so you contacted her, didn't you? Wasn't just the two of you. Jiang Yu, He Tian and Old Xia also met her, didn't you? While I was away on a business trip, the two of you had frequent gatherings with her, right?" Lin Jiege finally recovered from his daze, but before he could say anything, Shuyao, who had heard the loud knocking on the door, had already come out to see what was going on. She spoke up first. "How did you know?" Lin Jiege was also about to ask the same question, but hearing Shuyao's voice, he replied without any hesitation. Yao, I didn't say that." Lu Benlai, did he have to have such a strong desire to live? To avoid any unnecessary misunderstandings, Lu Benlai quickly explained everything that had happened. "I met Kiki before I met her at your place. She was alone back then and she got lost. I was the one who brought her home and Kiki grabbed my cufflinks. Her mother contacted me through a message." At this point, Lu Benlai suddenly recalled the day when he received a call from Coco's mother at the airport. As soon as he opened his mouth, she went completely silent. So, she recognized him. She knew who he was, so she hung up the phone. No wonder that phone call made him feel inexplicably uneasy. It was her call. No wonder. She knew about me long ago. What? Noticing that Lu Benlai's words didn't make sense at all, Lin Jiege couldn't help but interject. Recovering from his daze, Lu Benlai continued speaking. "So, Kiki's mother has my number. Tonight, when Kiki was playing games, she took out her mother's phone and called me and I heard her talking. There were a couple of times when they went out to play and Xia Shangzhe would tag along so he could see the interaction between Lin Jiayi and Qin Ting from the car. Every time Lin Jiayi finished her meeting with Qin Ting, she would tell Xia Shangzhe what she and Qin Ting talked about and how far they had progressed. Xia Shangzhe had always thought that he was able to handle it, but he soon realized that he had overestimated himself. As Lin Jiayi and Qin Ting got along better and better, the number of times he lost control of himself also increased. For example, there were times when he heard Lin Jiayi talking about Qin Ting while driving, and he would suddenly step on the brakes. Chapter 10:22. At first, Xia Shangzhe was still able to find an excuse to brush it off. But as the number of times increased, Lin Jiayi gradually noticed something amiss with him, and she started asking him what was wrong. His mood seemed to be a little off lately. Did something happen? Xia Shangzhe was really afraid that he would expose himself before Lin Jiayi, so he could only find a suitable opportunity to apply for a business trip and leave Lin Jiayi for a short period of time. By the time he finished his work and returned to Beijing, it was already early August. He arrived at the airport at noon. He had work to do in the afternoon, so he didn't even go home and directly took a taxi to the company. Lin Jiayi was supposed to meet a client in the afternoon, and upon seeing that he had returned, she had him accompany her to meet the client in the company. However, the client this time around was a little difficult to deal with. By the time they sent the client away, the sunny skies had already darkened. Lin Jiayi didn't have any plans that night, and Xia Shangzhou had just returned from a business trip. So after they were done with their work, Lin Jiayi asked Xia Shangzhou if he was busy. After Xia Shangzhou replied that he was free, Lin Jiayi suggested having a meal together. Xia Shangzhou did not refuse. Lin Jiayi didn't want to wear her work attire for dinner, so she had Xia Shangzhou wait for her while she headed to the resting room in the office to change her clothes. While Lin Jiayi was changing her clothes, Xia Shangzhou received a call from the front desk. There was an express mail for Lin Jiayi. Since there was nothing much to do, Xia Shangzhou headed over to the front desk to retrieve the package for Lin Jiayi. By the time Zhang Xian returned to Lin Jiayi's office, Lin Jiayi had just finished changing her clothes and was walking out of the resting room. Express delivery. Xia Shangzhou placed a large box on the table. Curious as to what was inside the box, Lin Jiayi had Xia Shangzhou wait for a moment before taking out the delivery knife from the drawer. Before Lin Jiayi could open the package, Xia Shangzhou suddenly recalled how she had cut herself with the delivery knife, so he spoke up first. "Let me help you open it." Lin Jiayi passed the delivery knife over to Xia Shangzhou. Soon the package was unpacked. Xia Shangzhou stood by the side with the delivery knife in hand, making way for Lin Jiayi so that she could open the package herself. The last gift to be opened was a bag. The latest Chanel collection. It had just gone on sale yesterday and Lin Jiayi had even posted a picture of it on her Moments. "That's strange. I haven't ordered this bag yet. Who gave it to me?" Lin Jiayi asked doubtfully as she grabbed her bag. Following which her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and immediately put on a smile. She turned to look at Xia Shangzhou. "Navigator, wait for me for a while." After Xia Shangzhou nodded, Lin Jiayi swiped her finger across the screen and answered the call. "Hello, Enchanting." Hearing this name, Xia Shangzhou lowered his head and took out his phone. How did you know I received a package?" "Oh no, this bag is from you." "I like it, of course I like it. What are you doing?" "What? In a taxi? Why are there foreigners talking next to you? Where are you?" Shortly after Lin Jiayi said those words, Xia Shangzhou watched as she hung up the call. A moment later she received another call from her phone. He picked it up and it turned into a video call. Lin Jiayi was looking at her phone screen so the call was put on speakerphone. Chapter 1023. Lin Jiayi didn't say a word. Instead she stared at her phone intently. Enchanting spoke up once more. "Can't you tell?" A second after he said those words, Lin Jiayi's eyes widened in realization. "Isn't this near the university?" "Enchanting, you're in America? And you even went to the university?" "Enchanting, that's right." "Lin Jiayi, why did you suddenly go to America?" Enchanting didn't say a word. The image on Lin Jiayi's phone kept changing and a moment later, it finally stopped at a certain spot. "You told me that we first met here, and here you said that our first date was here, and we even performed Romeo and Juliet in that auditorium. You were the one who told me all of this. We shared so many beautiful memories, but I can't remember any of them anymore. I don't know if I'll ever have the chance to remember them in this lifetime, but I still want to visit all the places where we shared our beautiful memories." Hearing Enchanting's words, Xia Shangzhou raised his head to look at Lin Jiayi. The young lady was staring at her phone screen with a visibly moved expression. "Jiayi, I'm sorry that I can't remember you anymore, and I'm also sorry that no matter how hard I try, I can't find my lost memories. But Jiayi, it took me a lot of effort to find this." As Enchanting said those words, Xia Shangzhou could clearly see a silver ring appearing on Lin Jiayi's phone screen. Lin Jiayi also had a silver ring and it was a pair with this one. "Jiayi, there's something that I've been wanting to say since the last time we met. Can we return to those beautiful stories that you told me? Can we be like the us in the stories you told us? Can we be happy together?" Xia Shangzhou tightened his grip on his phone. He stared at Lin Jiayi intently, and he could clearly see tears of gratitude glistening in her eyes. He could also clearly see her lips moving and he could even hear her saying, "Sure, sure, sure." She had only said it once, but it echoed in his ears countless times. When she came back to her senses, he had already left her office and was standing at his desk in a daze. He tried very hard to remember how he left her office, but he couldn't remember anything. All he felt was a faint pain in his leg. He reached out to rub it and then he slowly remembered that after he walked out of her office he seemed to have bumped into something, but he couldn't remember what exactly he bumped into. Xia Shangzhou stood dumbfounded on the spot for a moment longer before his gaze fell on a large bag placed by his desk. He stared at the bag for a long while before he took a few steps forward. Reaching out, he picked up the bag and carefully took out the box inside. Opening the packaging, he saw a bag identical to the one Lin Jai had just opened. It was always like this. Every time he saw her post something she liked, he would buy it. He knew that if he bought it, it would be the same as the bag this time and he would not be able to give it away, but he still bought it stubbornly. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't want to give it to her, but he didn't have the qualifications and reason to give it to her. He liked her and that was all he liked, secretly. Chapter 1024. Navigator? Navigator? Lin Joi's voice suddenly sounded behind him, and Xia Shangzhou abruptly reined in his thoughts. Little navigator? Little Xia Shangzhou? I'm only 2 years younger than her. Is there a need for her to use the word little every single time? As Xia Shangzhou grumbled in his mind, he subconsciously tried to turn around, but before he could make a move he suddenly heard Lin Jiai's footsteps behind him. Seeing the bag in front of him, Xia Shangzhou hurriedly placed it back into the box before stuffing it back into the bag in a fluster. But no matter how fast he reacted, Lin Jai still managed to catch a glimpse of the label on the box. HM? A Chanel box? Is it a bag or a pair of shoes? Perhaps it was due to his guilty conscience. Xia Shangzhou instinctively lied. A pair of shoes? That box doesn't look too big, so it should be a pair of women's shoes. As she spoke, Lin Jai looked at Xia Shangzhou with an expression as if she had just discovered a story. Who is it for? Do you have a girlfriend? Why didn't you tell me so that I could give you a raise? After all, dating is a very costly affair. Even though he knew that it was impossible for the two of them to be together, he still didn't want her to misunderstand him. Xia Shangzhou reflexively refuted the notion. No, I don't have a girlfriend. Right after saying those words, he realized that he had overreacted, so he quickly added. It's for my younger sister. She wants it, I see. Lin Jai didn't doubt his words. On the way out of the company with Xia Shangzhou, Lin Jai asked, Is your younger sister about to give birth to her second child? The last time she came to Beijing, I met her once when you drove my car around with her. She told me that she's pregnant with her second child, so it should be about time now, right? She gave birth last Friday. That's perfect. Tell me when you send the pair of shoes to your younger sister. I'll prepare a gift for her and you can send it back together. Isn't that a little inappropriate? Listen. What's inappropriate about it? If I say it's appropriate, then it's appropriate. As Lin Jai spoke, she raised her chin toward the car in front, gesturing for Xia Shangzhou to stop. Pose. You have to twist. While they were having dinner, Lin Jai received another call from Enchanting. From the content of their conversation, Xia Shangzhou could tell that Enchanting had come to Beijing for Lin Jai and was looking for a job. Lin Jai didn't chat too long with Enchanting before hanging up. Xia Shangzhou poured a bowl of soup for Lin Jai, and as Lin Jai picked up the bowl and slowly sipped on it, he asked, Is Mr. Qin coming to Beijing? Yeah, he came straight here after he came back from America. I felt bad that he gave up his previous job and came to Beijing. I mentioned letting him join the Lin Corporation, but he rejected me. He said he wanted to develop his own career. I thought about it, maybe every man wants to preserve his dignity, so I let him be. Looks like I have to congratulate you in advance, Boss Lin. The good news is coming. Chapter 1025. Before Xia Shangzhou could say anything, Lin Jai had already glared at him and said, You're not allowed to reject me. If you do, I'll deduct your salary. Xia Shangzhou's rejection was swallowed back down by Lin Jai. He was silent for a moment before replying, Fine. Having received a satisfactory answer, Lin Jai smiled. Seeing her smile, Xia Shangzhou's mood lightened up as well. Forget it, since she likes to introduce girlfriends to me, I'll just let her be. In any case, she's been my matchmaker over the years, so it's all up to me whether she succeeds or not. By the time Lu Benlai arrived at Leng Wan's apartment, the lights were already dimmed. He took a look at the time and saw that it was already 10 o'clock. Since Coco had to go to kindergarten tomorrow morning and Leng Wan had to go to work, they should be asleep by now. He didn't go upstairs to press the doorbell and wake them up. Instead he sat quietly in the car and waited. His cold hadn't recovered yet, so he waited until the latter half of the night. His head was throbbing with pain, so he leaned against the back of the car and closed his eyes for a moment. However, he didn't dare to really fall asleep, fearing that he would miss them if he slept too late. By 6 o'clock in the morning, Lu Benlai had already woken up. The elderly in the neighborhood were already out for their morning exercises. When it was nearing 7 o'clock, a large car drove into the neighborhood and stopped in front of Leng Wan's apartment. The truck had the sign Moving Company spray painted on it. Moving Company. Who would be moving so early in the morning? Could it be? He recognized Coco's voice when she called him last night, so naturally she knew that he recognized her as well. For someone to be moving here today. Could it be? As this thought flashed across Lu Benlai's mind, he quickly got out of the car and stopped a middle-aged man who was getting out of the moving car. Who's moving? It's the tenant on the 15th floor of this building. The 15th floor. Isn't that the floor where Leng Wan lives? Could it be that he had really guessed correctly? With such thoughts in mind, Lu Benlai hurriedly thanked the person he asked before rushing into the building. Upon reaching the 15th floor and stepping out of the elevator, Lu Benlai immediately saw Leng Wan's apartment. The door was open and she was standing at the entrance, chatting with a worker from the moving company who was already upstairs. Through the open door, Lu Benlai could see the furnishings in Leng Wan's house. It was completely different from the last time he was here. There were several packed cardboard boxes in the house, and there was no sign of the warmth that he had seen the last time he brought Cuckoo over. Other than the auntie standing at the door, Lu didn't see Leng Wan and Coco either. Thus he quickly walked over and asked, "Where in Wan Leng Wan Ku?" Chapter 1026. Thus, when he saw the moving company, his guess was right. Knowing that her whereabouts had been discovered by him, what she had to do was to hide quietly, just like she did 4 years ago. Lu Benlai glanced around the room before turning to look at the moving company standing by the side. After a moment of contemplation, he turned to the auntie of Leng Wan's house and said, "How about this? Don't ask them to move yet. Put the things that you've arranged back where they were." But, knowing what she was going to say, Lu Benlai spoke up once more, "Just do as I say. I'll talk to Nguyen Wan about it." Lu Benlai raised his wrist to take a look at the time. Kiki and Little Snack were in the same kindergarten, and they were supposed to enter the kindergarten at 8. It was only 7 now, so Leng Wan probably hadn't sent Kiki to the kindergarten yet. With this thought in mind, Lu Benlai said to the auntie, "I'll wait for her at the kindergarten now. Just do as I say. Don't worry, I'll try to persuade her." The auntie pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. "But we're already here." Overhearing the conversation between Lu Benlai and the auntie, the staff couldn't help but interject. "Don't worry, I won't let you make a wasted trip and I won't let your time go to waste either. I'll pay you." As he spoke, Lu Benlai took out his wallet and took out a stack of red notes. He passed it to the staff and said, "Count it and see if this is enough." After taking the money, the staff counted the amount he wanted before passing the rest back to Lu Benlai. "This is enough." Lu Benlai took out another 2 notes and passed them back to the staff. "Take this money as my treat." "I'm really sorry." It's fine, it's fine." The staff felt a little embarrassed by Lu Benlai's antics. He waved his hands and refused to accept Lu Benlai's money. Instead he said, "Since there's no need for us to move, we'll be leaving now." After receiving a nod from the auntie, he quickly turned around and entered the elevator. After the staff left, Lu Benlai quickly followed suit. Leng Wan's place wasn't too far away from the kindergarten. Lu Benlai took a look at the traffic and seeing that it was relatively smooth, he didn't take the subway. Instead he drove straight to the kindergarten. When he arrived at the entrance of the kindergarten, it was just 7:20. After parking the car, he first went to the entrance of the kindergarten to ask if Leng Kiki had arrived. After knowing that she hadn't arrived yet, he stood at the entrance of the kindergarten and waited. After staying in the car for an entire night, Lu Benlai's cold had worsened significantly. It didn't take long for him to stand at the entrance of the kindergarten before his head felt incredibly heavy. Lu Benlai tried his best to maintain his composure, but time seemed to drag on endlessly. Lu Benlai glanced at his watch from time to time, and as time ticked by, he grew more and more nervous. When it was nearing 7:40 p.m., more and more parents were appearing at the entrance of the kindergarten to send their children off. Afraid that he might miss something, Lu Benlai glanced around frantically. 7:46 p.m., a taxi stopped by the roadside. Roughly a minute later, the door was pushed open, and Lu Benlai saw a pair of white high heels sticking out from within. With just a quick glance, Lu Benlai's entire body froze. His eyes were fixated on the pair of high heels, and it wasn't until she got off the car that his gaze slowly moved up the heels. When his gaze finally fell on her face, his eyes suddenly felt a stinging sensation in them. They had parted so suddenly that they didn't even have a chance to say goodbye. But now, they were finally going to meet again. Chapter 10:27. Leng Wan didn't notice Lu Benlai. Instead, she carried Kiki toward the entrance of the kindergarten while talking to her. The one who noticed Lu Benlai was Kiki. Kiki had been obediently hugging Leng Wan's neck while listening to her speak, but for some reason, Kiki suddenly started calling for her daddy. Following which, Kiki released Leng Wan's neck and stretched her arms forward. "Kiki, if you continue like this, mommy will throw you." Before Leng Wan could finish her words, she caught sight of a familiar figure standing right in front of her from the corner of her eye. As if someone had sealed her acupoints, she froze on the spot. She subconsciously tightened her grip around Kiki. Kiki cried out in pain, "Mommy, it hurts, mommy." Leng Wan snapped out of her daze, but she continued staring at the figure before her for a moment before realizing what Kiki had said. She quickly retracted her grip. Kiki, who was no longer in pain, squirmed in Leng Wan's embrace before spreading her arms toward Lu Benlai once more. "Daddy hug, daddy hug." Lu Benlai, who had been in a daze ever since he saw Leng Wan, finally regained his senses. He subconsciously reached out toward Kiki, but before his fingers could touch her, Leng Wan had already circled around him with Kiki in her arms. "Kiki, we're going to be late soon. Mommy will send you to school." "I don't want school, I want daddy, daddy," Kiki cried out. Seeing that Lu Benlai was getting further and further away from her, her eyes reddened. "Mommy is naughty, I want daddy, daddy." "Kiki, if you continue to be so disobedient, mommy will get angry." Leng Wan rarely spoke to her daughter in such a strict manner, and it frightened Kiki. Kiki didn't dare to cry out anymore, but large droplets of tears still flowed down her cheeks. Leng Wan's heart ached for Kiki, but she didn't coax Kiki. Instead, she hastened her footsteps to the entrance of the kindergarten and passed Kiki to the kindergarten teacher. It was only after the aggrieved Kiki was taken away by the teacher that Leng Wan closed her eyes and took a deep breath to adjust her emotions. Then she turned around to look at Lu Benlai, who was standing not too far behind her. Neither of them moved. They stared at one another for a moment before Lu Benlai lifted his leg and walked forward. When he was standing right before Leng Wan, he said, "Wan Wan." It's been a long time. Leng Wan's emotions, which she had just managed to calm down with much difficulty, were instantly thrown into disarray. She mustered all of her strength to calm herself down, and after half a minute of silence she finally managed to maintain a calm tone and said, "Long time no see, Mr. Lu." Lu Benlai Wan. He never knew that the term of address that he heard many times a day actually had another meaning. "I have nothing to do with you anymore." Seeing that Lu Benlai wasn't saying a word, Leng Wan spoke up once more. "If there's nothing else, Mr. Lu, I'll be taking my leave." "Lin Wan. Lu Wan Kahard Lin Lu Long Kuku Lu Wan Lin, Wan. Lu. Chong Ku. Ling. He Ping Shao Kia Ku He I He Chong Lin." Chapter 10:28. Leng Wan didn't say a word. Lu Benlai knew that Leng Wan didn't want to talk to him. To be more precise, she didn't want to have anything to do with him at all. If he hadn't coincidentally bumped into Kiki and sent her home, he probably wouldn't have met her today. Without waiting for Leng Wan to speak, Lu Benlai spoke up once more. "There are so many people here, so it's not that convenient. If you don't mind, why don't you sit in my car?" As soon as Lu Benlai said those words, someone walked past them with a child. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that something was amiss with the atmosphere between the two of them, so the passers-by couldn't help but glance at them several times. Noticing this, Lung Nuan nodded her head in agreement. Lu Benlai pointed to the spot where his car was parked and said, "The car is over there." Without saying a word, Lung Nuan grabbed her bag and followed Lu Benlai to the side of the road. When they arrived at the car, Lu Benlai reached out to help Lung Nuan open the door to the front passenger seat, but Lung Nuan reached out to open the back door and entered the car. Lu Benlai stood on the spot for a moment before bending over and getting into the car himself. After closing the car door, Lu Benlai turned to look at Lung Nuan. "Nuan Nuan, how have you been all these years?" Before he could finish his words, Lung Nuan, who was sitting at the back of the car, spoke up calmly. Her expression was just like the first time he met her in school, filled with rejection and alienation. "I have to work at 9 and it's almost 8 now. It's a half-hour drive from here to my office, so Mr. Lu, you only have 20 minutes at most to talk to me." Of course, Lu Benlai knew what Lung Nuan was trying to say. She was telling him to get straight to the point. It hadn't been easy for them to go from her ignoring him to the point where they could talk about everything. But now they were back to square one again. Lu Benlai gulped down a mouthful of saliva. "Kiki is my child. Right?" "Yes." Lung Nuan didn't try to hide anything. "But don't worry, she won't affect your future marriage and children." "Nuan Nuan, you know that's not what I meant. That's why I'm asking you, Mr. Lu, I don't care what you're trying to say. You should know that I'm not interested." The interior of the car fell silent. He had been looking forward to meeting her every day, but after they actually met, he realized that everything was far worse than he had imagined. She had not returned to the starting point when they first met. She was now far more repulsive towards him than she had been back then. For a moment, Lu Benlai didn't know what to say. Chapter 1029. Lung Nuan paused for a moment. She feigned a calm demeanor and spat out everything she wanted to say. "I don't want to have anything to do with you in the future, even if it's your child. So I hope that our meeting today is both the beginning and the end." After expressing her intentions clearly, Lung Nuan pondered for a moment, and after confirming that she had nothing else to add, she continued, "Mr. Lu, is there anything else? If not, I'll go to work now." But before she could finish her words, Lu Benlai had already spoken up. "I'm sorry." Lung Nuan's voice suddenly fell silent. Her fingers subconsciously tightened their grip on her bag. After a moment of silence, Lu Benlai's voice sounded once more. "I'm sorry, Nuan Nuan. I was in the wrong back then. I didn't pay attention to my phone. I didn't know that you had called me 100 times. If I had known, I would have never done that." Lung Nuan felt her nose sting up. She turned her head away and looked out the window. "I'm sorry." Does he know that the word sorry can be the most hurtful thing to a person in love? He said that he didn't pay attention to his phone and didn't know that she had called him 100 times. He was saying it so casually now, but did he know how she had endured every single night for that 1 month 4 years ago? He was the person she had mustered all of her courage to accept back then. But in the end, he said that he wouldn't care about her anymore. He didn't reply to her messages, didn't pick up her calls, and even when she went to look for him, he refused to see her. He would never know what kind of emotions she had gone through back then. So, what was the point of him apologizing to her now? "Nuan Nuan, I'm sorry. I know that nothing I say will change your mind, but I didn't really mean it back then. I thought that you didn't like me. In any case, I was the one who did the wrong thing back then. After you left, I've been waiting for you and I've been looking for you all this time. All these years I've never had a girlfriend and I never thought of getting married. I've been waiting for you all this time. Now that you're back, can you reconsider me? Can we go back to how we were before?" Lung Nuan stared out the window impassively, as if Lu Benlai's words weren't directed at her. She waited for Lu Benlai to finish his words before asking, "Is that all you wanted to talk to me about?" Lu Benlai was taken aback by Lung Nuan's question. 3 seconds later he finally nodded. "I don't want to go back to the past. I'm living a good life now. I don't want to change the current situation." To be exact, she was afraid. She was afraid that she would muster up the courage to change the current situation like she did in the past and end up leaving with a sad ending. Chapter 1030. So, Lung Nuan took a deep breath before continuing. "So, I hope that our conversation this time will have cleared up everything. Alright, I've already said what I wanted to say and you should have said what you wanted to say as well, right? Anyway, it's about time for me to head to work. Without waiting for Lu Benlei's response, Lung Nuan pushed open the car door. Just as she was about to get out of the car, Lu Benlei turned around and shouted, "Nuan Nuan, but I still like you a lot." Lung Nuan didn't say a word, but her fingers, which were holding onto her bag, were trembling intensely. She pretended not to hear Lu Benlei's words and got out of the car in an orderly manner. A second after she steadied herself on the ground, he spoke once more, "Nuan Nuan." Afraid that he would say something that would disturb her emotions, Lung Nuan instinctively reached out to close the car door. But before she could do so, his words had already traveled into her ears. "Don't move anymore." Lung Nuan didn't expect that he would say such a thing. She was taken aback as she stared at him in disbelief. However, he didn't look at her. Instead, his head was lowered as he stared at his fingertips. It was hard to tell what he was thinking about. After a moment, he continued, "You said that it's not easy taking care of Kiki. You can't just move and change jobs whenever you want, so don't move anymore. I came over from your house this morning, and I've already told your auntie to pack up the things back to their original state. I've also sent the movers away. Didn't you move because I found out your address and you were afraid that I would pester you? You really don't have to hide from me like this. If you don't want me to disturb your life, I won't disturb you either. I'll listen to whatever you want. If you want to maintain the status quo, I promise that I won't do anything to you. Lastly, even though you might not need it, I still want to say that I still have my old phone number and you should know my current work number as well. If you and Kiki run into any trouble, feel free to look for me." Lung Nuan wasn't sure whether Lu Benlei had finished his words or not, so she abruptly raised her hand and slammed the car door shut. Without hesitation, she grabbed her bag tightly, turned around and hurriedly walked to the side of the road, flagged a taxi and left. A long while after she left, Lu Benlei finally turned around to look at the rearview mirror. She was nowhere to be found, but he still stared at the rearview mirror in a daze. To be honest, it was already a joyous occasion for him to be able to meet her again. Even if she wasn't willing to accept him for the time being, it didn't matter. He could just wait patiently. Just as Shi Yao had told him, he should tolerate her a little more and bear with her a little more. With such thoughts in mind, Lu Benlei couldn't help but fall into a daze. 4 years ago. If he had known how to love more 4 years ago, then he would have been more tolerant and patient with her. Would they have had a different ending then? Chapter 1031. The afternoon sun was exceptionally radiant. Lin Jie and Xia Sui had agreed to meet at the stud farm at 3 in the afternoon, but before 1, Lin Jie had already dragged Xia Shangzhou out of the company and headed to the shopping mall next door. However, this time, Lin Jie wasn't there to buy anything for herself. Instead, she headed to the men's sports area and picked out a set of clothes for Xia Shangzhou. Meaning to date a horseshoe gorge? To polypus? Sucking oxen from its mouth? Pine. On the way down to the elevator, Lin Jie would occasionally glance at Xia Shangzhou, who was standing beside her and had been dressed up again. She looked at him as if she was looking at her own child, and the more she looked at him, the more satisfied she became. In the end, she couldn't help but praise Xia Shangzhou. "Little navigator, I didn't think that you'd still look so handsome after some effort. You should buy some fashionable clothes in the future and dress yourself up more while you're still young. Don't always wear a white shirt or a black suit, it's so monotonous. Also, take off those black-rimmed glasses of yours. Don't wear them anymore. Let me tell you, I'm not trying to brag, but have you ever been through my hands? Have you ever tried to bully me, Sakura? Have you ever tried to mash me? How can I be blind?" As Lin Jie spoke, she reached out to tidy up Xia Shangzhou's hair. Her fingertips inadvertently brushed against his forehead. The soft touch made Xia Shangzhou's back subconsciously tense up. Lin Jie didn't notice anything amiss with him. After she was done with his hairstyle, she took 2 steps back and assessed him carefully. After making sure that there was nothing wrong with him, she said with a smile, "Little navigator, I'll take a photo of you at the stud farm later, so you can change your profile picture." Hearing her calling him little navigator, Xia Shangzhou couldn't help but reply, "Boss Lin, can you remove the word little?" "I can't. I'm only 2 years younger than you. I'm not 20. 2 years younger is still a little. Little brother, listen to me obediently and don't resist me. If I'm happy, I'll buy you candies, Xia Shangzhou." "Forget it, I'll just call him little navigator then." When they arrived at the stud farm, Xia Sui, whom Lin Jia had arranged to meet, hadn't arrived yet. She and Xia Shangzhou found a seat near the window in the lounge and sat facing each other while waiting. After about 10 minutes or so, Xia Sui arrived. Just as Lin Jia had described, Xia Sui was indeed a beautiful lady. Perhaps it was because she came from a family of scholars, but her actions and words were filled with a soothing disposition. Lin Jia's intention was to matchmake Xia Shangzhou and Xia Sui, so when Xia Sui arrived, she chatted with them for a while before leaving with the excuse that she needed to ride a horse. I heard from Jia that you graduated from Ji University. Yes. Your school is full of top students, so you're talking about the legendary top student? Xia Shangzhou smiled. But it's quite a coincidence that we're both surnamed Xia. Indeed, it sure is a coincidence. Xia Shangzhou seemed to be chatting casually with Xia Sui, but in truth his eyes were constantly sneaking glances at Lin Jia. Dressed in a black riding attire, Lin Jia was riding on a white horse as she galloped around the field. When the horse ran faster, her face would be filled with a bright smile. Every time he saw this sight, Xia Shangzhou's lips would curl up as well. But not too long later, the white horse, which was still fine a second ago, suddenly became agitated. Upon seeing this sight, Xia Shangzhou immediately stood up and dashed out of the lounge, heading straight for Lin Jia. Just as Xia Shangzhou was about to reach Lin Jia, the white horse suddenly stood up and flung Lin Jia off its back. Without any hesitation, Xia Shangzhou rushed forward to catch Lin Jia. Due to the immense impact, Xia Shangzhou fell to the ground together with Lin Jia. Even though the series of events had happened too abruptly, Xia Shangzhou still managed to protect Lin Jia perfectly, using his body as a cushion to prevent her from being knocked down by the rocks on the ground. However, before she could digest the shock from the earlier encounter, the white steed suddenly stomped down on Lin Jia's back. Chapter 1032. Upon noticing the danger, the staff and Xia Sui rushed over, and upon seeing this sight, they immediately shouted, "Jia, be careful. Miss Lin, be careful." Almost as soon as they shouted, Xia Shangzhou, who was beneath Lin Jia, abruptly flipped around with her in his arms. Following which, the white steed that had suddenly gone berserk stomped down on Xia Shangzhou's back before galloping past him and Lin Jia to continue galloping forward. Taking in the entire scene, Xia Sui could clearly see that Xia Shangzhou's arms were placed on either side of Lin Jia's head instead of pressing down on her body and hugging her. In fact, when the white horse stomped down on his back, his body swayed violently, but he didn't allow himself to fall onto the ground. This was a small detail that no one else noticed, and even Lin Jia, the person in question, was oblivious to it. However, Xia Sui saw through Xia Shangzhou's thoughts with a single glance. The reason why he was behaving this way wasn't because it was inappropriate for a man and a woman to touch each other, but because he was afraid that he would injure her if the white horse stomped down on his back. He had intentionally used such a method to separate the horse and Lin Jia with his body. On the other hand, Xia Shangzhou's face was exceptionally pale. Perhaps it was due to the immense force exerted by the horse, but he endured the pain and stared at Lin Jia beneath him for a moment before he finally managed to force himself to ask, "Lin, are you all right?" Lin Jia shook her head, but before she could say a word, Xia Shangzhou had already fallen heavily on top of her, and there was no reaction from her. Xia Shangzhou was awoken by the pain. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in the hospital. His surroundings were extremely quiet, and when he looked out of the window, all he saw was darkness. "You're awake." Before Xia Shangzhou, who was lying on the bed, could react, he heard an elegant voice coming from behind him. He subconsciously tried to turn around, but the moment he moved, he immediately sucked in a deep breath of cold air in pain. "Your back is injured, so don't move around recklessly," it was that elegant voice again. Following which, a cup with a straw was passed over to him. "Have some water." Xia Shangzhou turned his head and glanced at the person who had walked up to him. As he accepted the cup of water, he politely thanked her. "Thank you, Miss Xia." Xia Sui curled her lips and looked at him thoughtfully without saying a word. Xia Shangzhou did not notice Xia Sui's strange behavior, nor did he drink the water. Instead he asked, "Where's Chief Lin?" "Jia? Joy isn't very well." Before Xia Sui could finish her sentence, the glass in Xia Shangzhou's hand fell to the ground. He supported his injured body and struggled to get up from the bed. What happened to her? How could she not be well? "Are you hurt anywhere?" Seeing his reaction, Xia Sui hurriedly reached out and pressed on his shoulder. Calm down, I was just joking with you. She's fine, she went. After some thought, Xia Sui changed her words. He went to pick up Enchanting. Oh. Xia Shangzhou withered like a frosted eggplant. He lay back on the bed and did not say another word. Xia Sui, who had seen all of Xia Shangzhou's reactions ever since he woke up, stared at Xia Shangzhou for a moment, and she suddenly burst into laughter. Xia Shangzhou turned to look at Xia Sui and asked, "What are you laughing at?" Chapter 1033. As if struck by lightning, Xia Shangzhou's body stiffened, and he collapsed onto the bed, completely motionless. You like Joey? Xia Sui spoke up once more, but this time it wasn't a question like before. Instead it was a confident tone. Recovering from his daze, Xia Shangzhou replied, Miss Xia, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Mr. Xia, you can't be thinking that I'm spouting nonsense without any basis, right? Xia Sui leaned against the wall and stared at Xia Shangzhou as she spoke slowly. Did Joey tell you that I took psychoanalysis as an elective in university? I'm able to deduce the true thoughts of many people through the clues they leave behind. I even helped the police catch a fugitive once, and that incident was quite famous. Even to this day, the entire investigation process is still a case study in my university's law class. Oh, right, Mr. Xia. I'm not telling you all of this to show off my abilities. I'm just telling you that I really do have concrete evidence, Xia Sui said with a smile. Do you need me to analyze it for you? Xia Shangzhou didn't say a word. Xia Sui continued. Firstly, when Joey said that she went for a horse ride, leaving me alone with you, I already had my suspicions. Do you know why? It's because while we were chatting you looked at Jai a total of 37 times. Of those 37 times, you were smiling 20 times and Joy was very happy when you were smiling. Secondly, it's not that I'm trying to brag, but a woman like me isn't the kind of woman who can be neglected no matter where I go. Even though we were sitting face to face, you didn't pay any attention to me at all. There's only one reason for that. There's someone you care more about. Of course, what really proved my suspicions was when you rushed over to save Joy and shielded her with your body when the horse stepped on her back. Take note, I'm going to get to the main point here. You were shielding her, not hugging her. A normal person would definitely hug her to save someone, but you used your body to shield Joy from the horse and Jai. You were afraid that you would implicate her if the horse were to hurt you. To be honest, I already knew what was going on back then. Oh, pardon me, but I'm not the kind of person who likes to help others. The reason why I followed Jai to the hospital wasn't because I was interested in you, but because I wanted to prove whether my suspicions were right or not. Jai didn't go to fetch Enchanting. He went to buy you some food. The reason why I lied twice was to see your reaction. The first time when I said that Joy wasn't well, your reaction was so strong that it exposed your inner thoughts. The second time when I lied, I said that she went to fetch Enchanting. Your anxiety turned into disappointment. So, Mr. Xia, I'm certain that you like Joy. If I'm not mistaken, the reason why you're willing to meet me is because of Joy, right? Based on this, I can be certain that you like Joy, but Joy doesn't know that. When we were chatting in the afternoon, even though you didn't reveal much information to me, there's one thing that I'm certain of: you're a talented and capable student. There are probably quite a few people who want you to join them. The reason why you haven't left is also because of Jai, right? Am I right? Chapter 1034. Xia Sui's analysis was clear and logical, and every single one of her words pointed to the crux of the matter. She was brimming with confidence, but at the same time she didn't give Xia Shangzhou a chance to back down. Xia Sui saw him opening and closing his mouth in annoyance, but no words came out. It was inexplicably cute and she couldn't help but laugh. Then she stared at Xia Shangzhou with even more curiosity and said, "Tell me, won't you? When did you fall in love with Jai? Aren't you prepared to share your story with the first person who knows your secret?" Xia Shangzhou. It was just a second ago that she was acting like an official, but in the next moment she was acting cute. Are girls these days all so fickle? Xia Sui pondered for a moment before saying, "How about this? You tell me what I want to know and I'll tell you a secret regarding Jai. Let's make a deal. I accidentally discovered this secret and to this day no one else knows about it. Even Jai herself doesn't know that I know about it." Xia Shangzhou's heart wavered a little. Xia Sui continued tempting him. Do you really not want to know? That's Joy's dream. Xia Shangzhou's heart wavered. It's a few years ago. You're not being sincere. A few years ago is a few years ago. Xia Sui was dissatisfied with Xia Shangzhou's answer. Indeed, a few years ago is a few years ago. Was it the year Lin Jiage married Little Junior? Wasn't it even earlier than that? Xia Shangzhou pondered for a moment before replying. 6 years ago. 6 years. My God, you actually liked Jiayi for 6 years and you didn't reveal any flaws in it. I'm impressed. Xia Sui looked as if she had discovered a new continent, and her interest in Xia Shangzhou's love life deepened. How did you fall in love with Jiayi? How did I fall in love with her? Xia Shangzhou seemed to be stumped by the question. After a long moment of contemplation, he shook his head and said, I don't know. I only know that I was afraid of her at the start. She had a fiery temper and she was domineering. She would beat me up at the slightest disagreement. She would often make me work until the wee hours of the morning. Even in the middle of winter I was already in bed. She would call me to buy supper for her but she wouldn't eat it. Back then I couldn't help but think that she was a terrifying woman. If all the women in the world were like her, I would rather die alone. Xia Sui, what happened after that? Chapter 1035. Xia Sui didn't interrupt Xia Shangzhou. Instead, she listened quietly to his words. Honestly speaking, she had seen far too many outstanding men in her life, but at this moment she had to admit that Xia Shangzhou was truly charming. She treats the employees in the company very well. She is also very good to the employees in the company. She looks very domineering, but in fact, everyone likes her very much. Sun Ying's previous boyfriend cheated on her, and when he got married he even sent her an invitation. When she found out about this, she was very angry and lent her car to Sun Ying to drive, and even asked manager Zhang to accompany Sun Ying to attend her ex-boyfriend's wedding. She said, this is how you treat a heartless man. Since he wants to see you make a fool of yourself, then let him know how good you are without him. Also, Zhang Heng's wife was in a car accident and she's currently in the hospital. He wanted to get his salary in advance but he couldn't break the rules. Lin Jiayi rejected him on the surface, but in private she asked me to pay Zhang Heng and even hired the best doctor for him. She really has a lot of good things about her. Those are the things that move my heart, including her love for Qin Ting. He had seen how infatuated she was with Qin Ting all those years ago and how she never regretted her feelings for him. Seeing that Xia Shangzhou was done, Xia Sui asked, do you know that there are many people who are in love with Jiayi? I know. She's so outstanding that she deserves the love of so many people. But do you know that there's a high chance that nothing will come of you and Jiayi? Your one-sided love for her could very well lead to a meaningless ending. I know. I've liked her from the very start and I've never thought about anything. All I want is for her to be happy and happy. What about you? What about your happiness and happiness? Xia Shangzhou fell silent. If I'm not wrong, your monthly salary isn't that high, right? Your life in Beijing can't be considered wealthy, can it? With your capabilities, you should be able to attract quite a few headhunters, right? The reason why you're maintaining the status quo is because of Jiayi, right? Do you really think that it's worth it for you to give up love and money? Moreover, after she finds out about your feelings, have you ever thought that you might cause her psychological burden? In a relationship, there's no such thing as worth it or not. It's only whether you're willing or not. Furthermore, I don't want to achieve meteoric success and become rich enough to rival a country. I just want to live a peaceful life without worries. As for your last words, I know it might cause her trouble, so I never thought of letting her know. Therefore, I also hope that you can keep it a secret for me. I don't ask for too much and I won't disturb her too much. What I want to do is to silently accompany her so that she doesn't want to be alone forever. Let her be alone, never be alone. Xia Sui and Xia Shangzhou were chatting in the ward. Upon hearing those words, Lin Jiayi subconsciously tightened her grip on the takeaway in her hands. After buying dinner, she returned to the hospital. She was just about to push the door open and barge in when she heard Xia Sui's words through the door. You like Jiayi? As if someone had sealed her acupoints, she suddenly froze at the door, unable to move in the slightest. You like Jiayi? You are the navigator. He is Lin Jiayi. The navigator likes Lin Jiayi. Chapter 1036. Inside the ward, Xia Shangzhou and Xia Sui were still chatting, but Lin Joy wasn't listening to a single word. The only thing echoing in her ears was his words. Leave her alone. She doesn't want to be alone ever again. Hearing those words, Lin Joy's heart was thrown into disarray. She had to calm herself down, so she took 2 steps back and silently took the elevator out of the building, as if she hadn't been there at all. Half an hour ago there had just been a shower in Beijing, and the temperature had dropped significantly. The wind that blew against her face brought with it a refreshing coolness. Lin Jai stood in the wind for a moment, and the rising and falling of her chest gradually calmed down. Just as Xia Sui had said, she really had many admirers around her. While she couldn't be considered to have a discerning eye, she was still able to tell who was interested in her. Xia Shangzhou was the only exception. It had never crossed her mind that he was interested in her. She knew that he treated her very well. As long as he was around, she didn't even need to say anything about her habits and preferences, and he would arrange them for her. For example, she was afraid of the cold, so he would always prepare a blanket for her. Another example was that she liked to wear flats when no one was around. No matter where she was, as long as there were no outsiders around, she would always see a pair of flats. Another example was that she liked to eat sandwiches from an online restaurant, so she would see them on her desk at work every day. Another example was that her house was always a mess, so he would help her tidy it up every once in a while. Another example was that he seemed to have never stopped answering her calls, whether it was day or night, whether he was in the country or abroad. To be honest, there were times when she thought that he was overly meticulous and considerate, as if he was a robot. As long as she needed him, he would always appear, and as long as she asked, he would always answer. She had always thought that this was a tacit understanding they had developed through their work, but today she realized that it wasn't the case. The reason why he was able to make his position as an assistant so impeccable wasn't because of tacit understanding, but because he put in a lot of effort. He must have really put in a lot of effort to do everything that had to do with her perfectly, right? He must have really put in a lot of effort to hide his feelings so well that she couldn't see through it, right? Before hearing the conversation between Xia Sui and him, she didn't notice anything amiss. Now that she heard it, it was as if she had woken up from a dream. She realized that everything in the past was really heavy emotions. She really couldn't believe it. He was younger than her by 2 years, and he was classmates with her younger brother. In her eyes, she had always treated him as her younger brother. She had never thought of feelings for him, nor did she think that he would have feelings for her. The more Lin Jai thought about it, the more astonished she felt. The navigator had actually liked her for 6 years. But she had Enchanting. His feelings were destined to be fruitless from the beginning. It would have been fine if she didn't know about these things, but now that she did, what was she going to do next? She couldn't possibly allow him to continue wasting his time by her side and pour out his feelings for her, right? Chapter 1037. But if he's unwilling, I'll have to make a swift and decisive move. Just thinking about it. Lin Jai's heart suddenly throbbed with pain. It was a very light and fleeting sensation, but by the time she tried to feel it, the pain had already vanished without a trace. She thought that it was just her imagination, so she didn't pay it too much heed. After calming herself down, she returned to the hospital building and took the elevator back to the ward. This time, without any hesitation, she pushed the door open and entered. I'm back. As soon as she said those words, Xia Shangzhou and Xia Sui immediately shut their mouths. Lin Jai knew what was going on, but she feigned ignorance. She passed her coat to Xia Sui as she asked, "What are you two talking about? Why aren't you two talking as soon as I came in?" Xia Shangzhou lay on the bed guiltily, not saying a word. On the other hand, Xia Sui replied calmly, "Nothing much. We were just talking about his university life." Lin Jai replied with an "oh" as she scooped some of each dish into her small bowl. After which, she walked up to Xia Shangzhou and scooped a spoonful of rice into her spoon before bringing it to his mouth. Xia Shangzhou was overwhelmed by the favor. He shook his head and said, "Lin, I can do it myself." But before he could finish his words, Lin Jai had already shoved the spoonful of rice into his mouth. "I'm telling you to eat, so eat. Why are you spouting so much nonsense?" After saying those words, Lin Jai glared at Xia Shangzhou and said, "If a single grain of rice falls out of the rice I'm feeding you, I'll make sure that your chest is the same size as your back. This was the first time Xia Shangzhou had talked about his troubles with someone, so he couldn't help but feel a little guilty upon seeing Lin Jiayi's sudden return. However, seeing that she was no different from usual, he heaved a sigh of relief and obediently shut his mouth to eat. Lin Jiayi had never been a patient person, but she didn't urge Xia Shangzhou to hurry up and eat. It wasn't until he had swallowed all the food in his mouth that she exclaimed, as if feeding him a snack, before scooping another spoonful of rice and shoving it into his mouth. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed since Leng Yuan and Lu Benlai parted ways at the entrance of the kindergarten, and Leng Yuan hadn't seen Lu Benlai even once. Despite Lu Benlai's assurance, Leng Yuan still couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. She was afraid that things would get messy between them, so she decided to stay in the hotel with Kiki. But for the next 3 days when she sent Kiki to kindergarten, she didn't see Lu Benlai at the entrance. It was only then that she gave up on the idea of moving and brought Kiki home. Days passed by one after another. Leng Yuan continued working from 9 to 5 as usual and took care of Kiki. On the other hand, it was as if Lu Benlai had never reunited with her, and there wasn't the slightest ripple in their lives. Ever since her reunion with Shi Yao, she had kept in close contact with them. She would often bring Kiki over to Shi Yao's place to play, and she had met Liang Jisi, Jiang Yu, Desolate Year, He Tian, and even Lin Jiayi and Xia Shangzhou, who had just been discharged from the hospital. The only thing she hadn't met was Lu Benlai. It was only then that Leng Yuan finally believed Lu Benlai's words. Knowing that he wouldn't disturb her life, she finally heaved a sigh of relief. On the 27th day after her reunion with Lu Benlai, Leng Yuan worked late into the night. By the time she was done with her work, it was already 9 p.m. Chapter 1038. It was difficult to wait for a taxi, so by the time Leng Yuan returned to the entrance of the neighborhood, it was already 10:30. After paying the fare, Leng Yuan held onto her umbrella and hurriedly made her way to her apartment building. Just as she was about to reach the building, Leng Yuan noticed a car parked by the side. The car's headlights were still on. Did someone just get off work? Out of reflex, Leng Yuan shot a glance in the direction of the car. Through the dense rain, Leng Yuan couldn't help but feel that the car was extremely familiar. However, she didn't think too much about it. Instead, she glanced at the top of the car, and through the dripping windshield she saw the person sitting in the driver's seat. Leng Yuan's footsteps subconsciously came to a halt. Lu Benlai. What is he doing downstairs in the middle of the night? Leng Yuan instinctively tightened her grip on her umbrella. Fortunately, Lu Benlai was busy on the phone, so he didn't notice her. It had been almost a month since they last met. In this month he seemed to have lost a lot of weight and he looked a little haggard. Is he busy with work recently? While Leng Yuan was deep in thought, she suddenly realized that she was overthinking things. So, she quickly retracted her gaze and pretended as if she hadn't seen anything. She walked into the building, closed her umbrella, pressed the elevator and returned home. As it was too late, Kiki was already asleep. The auntie heard the commotion and walked out of her bedroom. Leng Yuan chatted with the auntie about Kiki before heading into her bedroom. Seeing the sleeping Kiki on the bed, Leng Yuan's gaze softened. She didn't stay for too long before grabbing her pajamas and towel and heading into the bathroom. After her shower, Leng Yuan took the warm milk from the auntie. After drinking half a cup, she seemed to have thought of something. She walked to the window and looked down. Lu Benlai's car was still there. It's already past 11. Why isn't he back yet? After finishing the milk, Leng Yuan saw that the car downstairs showed no signs of leaving, so she didn't move. When the auntie came out of the shower, she saw Leng Yuan staring blankly out of the window, so she walked over curiously. The auntie followed Leng Yuan's gaze and looked down. When she saw the car with its headlights on, she asked, "Is this car here tonight?" Hearing the auntie's voice, Leng Yuan glanced at her. Noticing that Leng Yuan was looking at her, the auntie knew that she was interested in the car, and she began to ramble on endlessly. "I remember this car. Of all the cars downstairs, this is the most expensive one. Around 20 days ago, I would wash Nanan's clothes at this time every day at this time and come to the balcony to dry them after my shower. Speaking of which, it's really weird. The lights of this car are always on, which means that there's someone inside. Who do you think it is?" Chapter 1039. Lying on the bed, Leng Nuan closed her eyes and prepared to sleep, but she didn't feel the slightest bit sleepy. She knew very well that she had been affected by Lu Benlai. She knew that she shouldn't be acting like this, but she still tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep no matter how hard she tried. After some time she got off the bed and walked to the balcony. She lifted the curtains and peeked down. His car was still there, but the rain had stopped. He wasn't sitting in the car but standing beside it. From the auntie's words, she knew that he would come to her house every night and sometimes he would even stay overnight. Was it because of this that she saw him looking so haggard earlier? He said that he wouldn't disturb me and Kiki, so even though he didn't disturb me on the surface, he still came to my house secretly? After standing on the balcony for a while longer, Leng Nuan returned to her bed. She closed her eyes but she still couldn't fall asleep. So she got up and walked to the balcony to take a look. After doing this 4 to 5 times, Leng Nuan returned to the balcony. The spot where Lu Benlai's car was parked earlier was already empty. He had left. Leng Nuan stared at the empty spot for a few seconds before returning to her bed. This time when she closed her eyes she fell asleep. Because of tonight, Leng Nuan frequently wandered to the balcony on the second night. At around 9:30 she saw Lu Benlai's car driving over. On the third night his car appeared before 9 o'clock. On the fourth night his car only appeared at 11 o'clock. Xia Shangzhou stayed in the hospital for a week before he was discharged. Due to his injuries, Lin Jiayi gave him a long leave. And since he was injured because of Lin Jiayi visited him almost every day while he was recuperating. A month later Xia Shangzhou went for a checkup. He planned to take a taxi to the hospital alone, but before he could leave he received a call from Lin Jiayi. Lin Jiayi said that she would accompany him for his checkup, and she would be arriving at his house soon. Xia Shangzhou went downstairs and in less than half a minute he saw Lin Jiayi's car. In truth he was already able to drive. He offered to have Lin Jiayi sit in the back seat while he drove, but Lin Jiayi rejected his offer. Upon arriving at the hospital, Lin Jiayi accompanied Xia Shangzhou to find a doctor. After filling out a medical report he underwent a series of checkup. By the time they received the report, it was already noon. Xia Shangzhou's recovery was quite good. He had basically recovered. After walking out of the hospital, Lin Jiayi didn't wait for Xia Shangzhou to say anything before tossing the car keys over to him, gesturing for him to drive. It wasn't the weekend so he needed to go to work. When Xia Shangzhou started the car he habitually asked, "Are you going back to the company?" Lin Jiayi shook her head and said, "No, let's go to Beijing World Hotel." Thinking that Lin Jiayi had an appointment with someone at the Beijing World Hotel, Xia Shangzhou stepped on the accelerator without asking any questions. When they arrived at the Beijing World Hotel and entered the suite, Xia Shangzhou realized that there were only 2 sets of cutlery on the table. He shot a perplexed glance at Lin Jiayi, only to see her pointing to the empty seat opposite her with a bright smile and saying, "Take a seat." Xia Shangzhou pulled out a chair and sat down as he asked, "Just the 2 of us?" Without replying to Xia Shangzhou he turned to look at the waiter beside him and said, "Serve the dishes." After the attendant left, Lin Jiayi noticed that Xia Shangzhou was still staring at her, so she turned to Xia Shangzhou with a smile and said, "I have something to tell you." Chapter 1040. Navigator, come to my office for a moment. I have something to tell you. Xia Shangzhou, where are you? Come here for a moment, I have something to tell you. Navigator, don't leave after work. I have something to tell you. Xia Shangzhou could hear Lin Jiayi saying this to him almost every day, but for some reason as soon as she said those words, his heart skipped a beat, and a sense of unease welled up in his heart. He stared at Lin Jiayi's beautiful face for a moment, but he couldn't find anything amiss. So he asked, "Boss Lin, did something happen?" Noticing Xia Shangzhou's anxiety, Lin Jiayi chuckled and replied, "No, it's something good." Lin Jiayi paused for a moment before adding, "It's work-related, but let's eat first. We'll talk about it after lunch." "If it's work-related, why didn't you talk about it in the office? Why must you talk about it here?" Xia Shangzhou was still feeling uneasy, but seeing that Lin Jiayi didn't seem any different from usual, he thought that he was just being sensitive, so he listened to her words and didn't ask any further. Soon the waiter served the dishes that Lin Jiayi had ordered in advance. Xia Shangzhou took a look and realized that most of them were his favorite dishes. He glanced at Lin Jiayi in astonishment. Perhaps it was because he had been neglected by her for too long, but the uneasiness in his heart grew even stronger. Lin Jiayi caught his gaze and smiled at him. She picked up her chopsticks, picked up some food and placed it on his plate. Eat while it's hot. Boss Lin, you should eat too. Xia Shangzhou's ears reddened as he stared at the food on his plate for a moment before reluctantly stuffing it into his mouth. Lin Jiayi didn't seem to have much of an appetite. She didn't touch much of the food before putting down her chopsticks. On the other hand, Xia Shangzhou had eaten quite a bit. By the time he finally stopped eating, he realized that Lin Jiayi had already wiped her hands and reapplied her lipstick. She was leaning back in her chair and looking at him. He noticed that there was only a tiny bit of oil on her plate and he couldn't help but frown. Boss Lin, is your appetite bad? Why haven't you eaten yet? Do you want to take a look at the menu and add something else? As he spoke, Xia Shangzhou beckoned the waiter over. Lin Jiayi quickly stopped him and said, "There's no need, I'm not that hungry. But I still have to eat something for lunch." Before Xia Shangzhou could finish his words, Lin Jiayi interjected once more, "Xia Shangzhou." How often did she hear him do this? Bumuai? The benevolent scorpion department? Stonewall? Bushiyu? Tom? Blink? Euclidean frames? Leech? Kimo? Vomit? Rumble. Before Xia Shangzhou could finish his words, Lin Jiayi interjected once more, "Xia Shangzhou." Lin Jiayi didn't allow her thoughts to wander too far away, so she quickly reined them in and asked Xia Shangzhou, "How long have you been in the Lin family enterprise?" Perplexed by Lin Jiayi's sudden question, Xia Shangzhou was taken aback for a moment before replying, "It's been 7 years and 2 months. 7 years and 2 months. More than 2,600 days. What a long time." Hearing Lin Jiayi's words, Xia Shangzhou didn't say a word, but his heart couldn't help but leap up in his throat. "Navigator, tell me honestly, are there a lot of people trying to poach you?" Chapter 1041. No. Even if someone were to say something about you, I wouldn't believe them. Hearing Lin Jiayi's reply, Xia Shangzhou calmed down a little, but a moment later he felt uneasy once more. That can't be right. If no one is going to say anything about me, why is she bringing this up to me for no reason? The more he thought about it, the more Xia Shangzhou felt that it wasn't going to be anything good. He stared at Lin Jiayi silently, but the corners of his lips were already tightly knitted together. "Navigator, it's been so many years since you joined the company, but you're still working under me. It's really a waste of your talents. I've neglected this matter. According to the rules of the Lin Consortium, you should have been promoted a long time ago. You might even be able to lead a department to work on some projects by now. In any case, it's a problem on my end. While you were recuperating from your injuries, I communicated with the shareholders of the Lin Consortium and convinced them to send you to the branch in the east of Beijing as the director." No wonder he had been feeling uneasy. It turned out that when she said she had something to tell him, she wanted to transfer him. No, she wanted a promotion. But he didn't want a promotion or a raise at all. If he wanted to, he could have just jumped ship 6 years ago. At that time, the conditions that others gave him were already tens of millions of dollars a year. Xia Shangzhou subconsciously spoke up. "Boss Lin, I don't think I should." As if she hadn't heard his voice, Lin Jiayi raised her voice and continued, "The position of director isn't high, but it's currently the highest position in the branch and it holds the most authority. Because the CO hasn't been decided yet, Navigator, do a good job when you're there. I guarantee that by the end of the year, you'll be able to become the CO. Also, as for your salary, since you've been working at the Lin Consortium for 7 years, I've specially fought for a CEO's salary for you. You don't have to worry about the handover of my work, I can handle it. Also, you don't have to come to work for the next few days. While you've just recovered, you should take a good vacation to relax. On the 1st of next month you can start working at the branch directly." "Why so sudden? Is it because I saved you? Are you repaying me?" "That's not it." Lin Jiayi shook her head. "It's because of your own hard work. I'm not the kind of person who would use public office for private gain. Take Enchanting for example. He's my boyfriend, but he doesn't know how capable he is. Even if I were to allow him to enter the Lin Consortium, I would only give him a low-level job." He didn't want to leave, but Lin Jiayi's every word rendered him speechless. If it was anyone else, they would be very happy to face such a thing, right? If he insisted on being her assistant, he was afraid that she would find out that he had other intentions for staying by her side. Xia Shangzhou's lips moved again and again, but in the end no words came out. Seeing his reaction, Lin Jie couldn't help but feel her heart soften a little. She suddenly wanted to take back her words and consider whether she should continue having him stay by her side. Chapter 1042. He was willing to do anything for his feelings, but she couldn't just watch as he fell too deeply into it. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jie suppressed the softness in her heart and looked at Xia Shangzhou with a smile. What's wrong, navigator? Why aren't you reacting at all to your sudden promotion and salary increase? Have you gone silly from joy? Hearing Lin Jie's question, Xia Shangzhou finally recovered from his daze. He tried his best to suppress the raging emotions in his heart and squeezed out a smile for Lin Jie. I'm happy. Of course I'm happy. I'm about to become a successful young man. How can I not be happy? Lin Jie smiled as she raised the teacup on the table towards Xia Shangzhou. Navigator, thank you for your cooperation over the years. I wish you a bright future ahead of you. He didn't want a bright future, he just wanted to stay by her side. But he didn't have the right to say these words. The only thing he could do was to follow her lead and raise the teacup on the table toward her. Thank you, Boss Lin. I also thank you for your years of nurturing me. I wish you happiness for the rest of your life. Thank you. Lin Jie brought the teacup to her lips with a smile and gulped down the tea in a single gulp. Xia Shangzhou stared at Lin Jie intently, and it was only when she put down the teacup that he retracted his gaze and gulped down the tea in a single gulp. After lunch, Lin Jie was about to return to the company, but Xia Shangzhou offered, Boss Lin, allow me to send you back. There's no need for that. I'll walk by myself. You should go home and rest. Faced with Lin Jie's rejection, Xia Shangzhou pondered for a moment before adding, while there's no need for me to hand over my work, there are still some things that I'm responsible for. I'll follow you back to the company to talk to the secretarial office about some important matters so that you don't end up making a mess of things. Hearing those words, Lin Jie pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. All right. After returning to the company, Lin Jie headed straight for a meeting. Xia Shangzhou looked for the secretary who had been with Lin Jie for the longest time and began handing over his work to her one by one. By the time he was done with the handover of work, 2 hours had already passed. Lin Jie's meeting still hadn't ended yet. Xia Shangzhou sat in his post of 7 years in a daze for a moment before he began tidying up his things. Lin Jie's lost keychain, Lin Jie's lost bag, Lin Jie's lost pen, Lin Jie's lost hair clip. All these years he would throw those trivial things that she didn't want into the office drawer. At this time, as he organized them, he actually organized a big box. After Xia Shangzhou packed up the things he wanted to take with him, he glanced at the conference room. The door of the conference room was tightly shut, and there was no sign that the meeting was about to end. However, he had no intention of bidding farewell to her after the meeting. Instead, carrying a large suitcase in his arms, he circled around the massive office and scanned his colleagues who were immersed in their work. Eventually, his gaze fell on Lin Jie's office. He stared at the door for a long time, then withdrew his gaze, turned around and walked away without looking back. She had long known that one day he would leave her side. Over the years she had been working hard, hoping that the day of his departure would come a little later. But in the end the day still came. So farewell. Chapter 1043. Walking out of Lin's enterprise building, Xia Shangzhou turned around and looked up at the towering building behind him. Then he walked to the side of the road and hailed a taxi to go home. Sitting in the cab, memories of the past flooded into his mind like a tidal wave. 7 years ago he had come to the Lin family enterprise to apply for a job, only to find out that the person who had applied for his position was Lin Jie. He thought that he must have forgotten to look at the almanac when he went out today. How unlucky, he had received a call to join the Lin family enterprise, and it was only then that he realized that he was working under Lin Jie. From then on he began a miserable life of being enslaved by her. When he first entered the workplace, There were many things that he didn't understand, and it was her who taught him. She had a bad temper, but she never despised anyone who was stupid. She allowed him to make mistakes and suffer losses as long as he learned from his mistakes. He slowly came to understand her better and better, and the day when she would break her heart for Enchanting slowly became the most difficult day in his life. Until today, when he left the Lin family enterprise and left her side. After paying the cab fare, Xia Shangzhou returned home, closed the door and put down the things in his embrace. Suddenly, as if he had lost all of his strength, he collapsed onto his bed. He stared at the ceiling, and as he stared at it, he suddenly raised his hand to cover his eyes. A long while later, tears began trickling down the corners of his eyes. Say, why did I overestimate myself and fall in love with her? Say, why did she kiss me on the cheek when she was drunk and called out Enchanting's name? Say, why isn't she a domineering and unreasonable heiress of a wealthy family? As long as she's in a terrible state, even if it's just a little worse than it is now, he could still find an excuse to make me dislike her less? Xia Shangzhou had no idea how long he had been lying on the bed with his stiff body. All he knew was that by the time he finally regained his senses, the room was already pitch black. He didn't get up to turn on the lights. Instead, he allowed himself to vent his emotions in the darkness for a while before he picked up his phone, searched for Lin Jierge's number and made a call. Soon the call connected. Hello, old Xia. Hearing Lin Jierge's voice, Xia Shangzhou felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He tried his best to compose himself before saying, "Boss, I need your help with something. It's been so many years since I've asked you for help, but this is the first time." After the meeting, Lin Jie went to meet with her clients. By the time she was done, it was already 8 in the evening. Back in the office, she instinctively dialed Xia Shangzhou's landline number. The phone rang for a long time, but no one picked up. Other than his laptop, everything else was gone. Staring at the empty seat in front of her, Lin Jie suddenly felt as if she had lost something in her life, and an emptiness filled her heart. She didn't know how much time had passed before her phone rang on her desk. Chapter 1045. Time flowed by like flowing water. In the blink of an eye, the scorching summer had turned into the frigid early winter. It was early November, and the rain in the evening made the already cold weather even colder. Even though the heater wasn't turned on yet, it was still chilly. In the morning, when Leng Nuan sent Kiki to kindergarten, Kiki sneezed a little. After returning from kindergarten in the afternoon, Kiki wasn't as energetic as usual, so she didn't eat much for dinner. Afraid that Kiki would fall sick, Leng Nuan gave her a bath early before coaxing her into bed. Due to the cold weather, Leng Nuan even added a blanket for Kiki. Coco fell asleep before 9 o'clock. Leng Nuan had some unfinished work to do, so she quietly left the bedroom and headed to the living room to work overtime with her laptop. At around 10, the glass of water beside her laptop was empty. She subconsciously wanted to call for the auntie to refill her glass, but she swallowed the words back down. She got up and headed to the dining room to get herself a glass of warm water. While drinking the water, she pretended to be admiring the night view as she walked to the balcony and looked downstairs. The car that would usually be parked downstairs at this hour hadn't appeared yet. Leng Nuan didn't pay too much attention to it. After drinking the water, she returned to her laptop and continued working. By the time she was done with her work, it was already around 11. She closed her laptop and headed to the balcony to get a change of underwear. Just as she was about to head to the shower, she glanced downstairs once more. It was still empty. In the past, his car would always appear downstairs at 11 at the latest. Why isn't he here even after 11 tonight? Leng Nuan stared blankly downstairs for a moment before entering the bathroom. While bathing, Leng Nuan roughly counted the days in her heart. As she counted, she hastily rinsed off the shower gel on her body, wiped off the water droplets, put on her pajamas and hurried to the bedside. She picked up her phone and took a look at the time she had recorded. She counted 3 times before she could confirm that tonight was the 101st day. It was the 101st day since the first time he appeared downstairs. In other words, the day before yesterday was the 99th day, And yesterday was the 100th day. Since he didn't appear today, does this mean that he has given up just like the 100 calls I gave him back then? Lung Wan subconsciously tightened her grip around her phone. When she finally came back to her senses, she realized that she had been influenced by Lu Benlai once more. Actually, all these years he had always been that person who could inadvertently affect her emotions. It was just that she had tried her best to restrain herself. Just like in the past 3 months, ever since she found out that he would come to her house every day, she had been constantly affected by him. Now that she had endured 100 days, she thought that in the future she would completely calm down and not be affected by him like this, right? With such thoughts in mind, Lung Wan tried her best to suppress the surging emotions in her heart. She put down her phone and headed to the bathroom to dry her hair. After leaving the room, Lung Wan didn't head straight to bed. Instead, she headed to the nursery to check on Kiki. Coco lay on the bed, sleeping soundly, her face red. Chapter 1046. When it was about time, Lung Wan took the thermometer and took a look. It was 39 degrees Celsius. Lung Wan didn't dare to casually use medicine on Keek's fever, so she used alcohol to lower Keek's temperature, hoping to see if it could help with the fever. However, even after an hour, Keek's temperature showed no signs of going down. Feeling a little worried, Lung Wan instructed the auntie to take care of her before leaving with Kiki and her wallet. After walking down the stairs, Lung Wan ran out of the neighborhood with Kiki in her arms and stood at the entrance to hail a cab. As it was already late, taxis were scarce. Lung Wan stood in the cold wind for more than 10 minutes, but seeing that no cab was coming, she decided to carry Kiki and run to the nearby hospital. She was so worried about Coco that she didn't pay attention to her surroundings. All she saw was a car coming towards her. When it came to her side, it stopped for a moment. She didn't pay it much attention and quickly ran past the car. She walked for about 10 meters when the car suddenly reversed to her side, violating the rules. Hearing the commotion, Lung Wan subconsciously glanced at the car beside her. The car window rolled down, revealing Lu Benlai's face, whom she thought wouldn't appear tonight. He was dressed in a very formal suit and his hair was waxed. Even though he was sitting in the car, she could still smell the faint scent of alcohol and perfume. She thought that he was probably at a dinner party and had just ended. While Lung Wan's mind was wandering, Lu Benlai suddenly spoke up. "What's wrong?" Lung Wan, who was still immersed in her own thoughts, didn't say a word. Lu Benlai frowned when he saw Kiki in her arms. "Kiki, what's wrong?" he asked as he pushed open the car door and got out. Walking up to Lung Wan's side, he noticed that Keek's face was abnormally red and his frown deepened. He reached out to touch Keek's head, only to realize that it was frighteningly hot. Thus he hurriedly reached out to hug Kiki. "I'll send you to the hospital." His actions alarmed Lung Wan. Noticing her reaction, Lu Benlai quickly retracted his hand and said, "It's already so late, so it's hard to hail a cab. Why don't you get into my car? I'll send you to the hospital." Noticing his reaction, Lung Wan stared at his clenched fist for a moment before nodding her head lightly. Seeing her nod in agreement, Lu Benlai nearly burst into laughter on the spot. He took 2 steps back to the side of his car, and he was just about to walk around the car to open the passenger door for her when he recalled that she was carrying Coco, so he decided to open the back door instead. After Lung Wan carried Coco into the car, Lu Benlai helped her close the car door before quickly getting into the car. After which he turned the car around and drove toward the hospital. On the way to the hospital, the two of them didn't talk at all. However, from time to time, Lu Benlai would glance at Lung Wan. When he noticed that Lung Wan's head was tilted to the side as she stared at the toys and clothes placed on the back seat, he coughed awkwardly and explained, "I bought those things for Kiki. I don't know if Kiki will like it, especially the clothes and shoes. I don't even know if the size is right. I know you don't need it, but I don't have any other intentions. I just bought it because it looks good. Don't worry." Retracting her gaze from the toys and clothes, Lung Wan turned to stare out of the window, not saying a single word. Chapter 1047. A second after Lu Benlai parked the car at the hospital, The worried Leng Yuan immediately reached out to push open the car door. Before Leng Yuan could get out of the car with Coco in her arms, Lu Benlai was already standing by the back door. When Leng Yuan got out of the car, he noticed that Leng Yuan was struggling to carry Coco, so he reached out to help her. Leng Yuan's movements stiffened a little, but she didn't avoid Lu Benlai. After getting out of the car, Leng Yuan carried Coco and headed straight for the emergency building. Lu Benlai closed the car door and hurriedly chased after them. Just as they were about to register, Lu Benlai called out to Leng Yuan, "I'll go. It's not convenient for you to carry a child." Leng Yuan hesitated for a moment before passing Coco's information over to Lu Benlai. While registering, Lu Benlai took a look at Coco's birthday, 28th of March. So, Coco is a little lamb. Even though it was late at night, there were still quite a number of people who came to the emergency room to treat children. When they arrived at the designated department, Leng Yuan saw that there were still around a dozen numbers ahead of her, so she turned to Lu Benlai and said, "Thank you for tonight. I can stay here alone for now. It's getting late, so you should head back and rest." Lu Benlai stared at the thin sweater Leng Yuan was wearing for a moment before nodding his head. He didn't follow Leng Yuan inside. Seeing that he wasn't saying anything, Leng Yuan didn't say anything either. She carried Coco to the consultation room and found a spot to queue up. Roughly an hour later, it was finally Coco's turn. Coco was fine. Perhaps it was due to the sudden drop in temperature, but her fever was still too high. Under the doctor's guidance, Leng Yuan still gave Coco some medicine. She carried Coco out of the emergency building, intending to head straight to the hospital entrance to hail a cab home. But before she could walk down the stairs, she saw Lu Benlai standing under the streetlight. Her footsteps subconsciously came to a halt. Lu Benlai had already noticed her, and upon seeing her, he straightened his back and asked, "Coco, are you all right?" Leng Yuan shook her head. "I'm fine." "It's good that you're fine." Lu Benlai was rendered speechless. After a moment of silence, he spoke up once more, "It's already too late and the weather is cold. Don't carry Coco. You'll worsen her illness. So I'll send you back." Leng Yuan nodded her head lightly. Lu Benlai inwardly heaved a sigh of relief as if he was overjoyed. He took out the clothes he had hidden behind him and said, "You should wear a coat. You were in a hurry to leave the house, so you didn't wear anything. Don't fall sick before Kiki recovers." Leng Yuan stared at the clothes in Lu Benlai's hands for a moment before replying softly, "Thank you." Lu Benlai knew that she had agreed to it, so he reached out to drape his jacket over Leng Yuan. After that, the two of them stopped talking. Returning to the car, Leng Yuan carried Kiki and sat in the back seat. She gazed at the night scenery outside the window. Perhaps it was because Lu Benlai had added a coat for her, but she suddenly recalled the time when she went to the movies with Shi Yao and the others in her third year of university. It was also November and Beijing had just started to get cold, so the heater hadn't been installed yet. She was so cold that she couldn't stop shivering. When he sent her a message, she casually replied that it was really cold today and her hands and feet were freezing. Then, when she was done shopping with Shi Yao and the others and walked out of the shopping mall, she saw him holding the clothes in his hands. Chapter 1048. Ever since then, the two of them had been getting along very well. He was her salvation. Bit by bit, he helped her let go of that nightmare and start a new life like a normal girl. The strength he gave her was something she couldn't believe. She had been trying her best to let go of the past, and she had even thought of telling him about the nightmare she had been through. But for some reason he had suddenly let go. So completely. For a month he had completely shut her out of his world. It was only when she was stopped by the receptionist at the entrance of his company, saying that he was out on a business trip, that she saw him walking out of the company with her own eyes, that she finally understood that she had been abandoned by her salvation. It was her own decision to accept him back then, so she was willing to bear the consequences no matter how she ended up. So after he left, she accepted the fact that she couldn't sleep at night. She accepted the fact that she suddenly burst into tears when she saw other girls hanging out with their boyfriends. Even when she found out that she was pregnant with Kiki 2 months later, she accepted the fact that she was pregnant with him. No one knew how much effort and time it took for her to slowly get used to a life without him. But now he had suddenly appeared in her world and wanted to enter her life. She really couldn't bear the consequences. It didn't take long for the car to stop below Leng Wan's apartment. She pushed open the car door, and when she got out, Lu Benlai glanced at the coat she had placed on the back seat. "Keep your coat on. It's not too far away, but it's still quite cold." Leng Wan shook her head and replied, "It's fine, there's no need for that." Then she carried Kiki out of the car. She glanced at Lu Benlai, who had gotten out of the car with her, and after a moment of thought she said, "Thank you," before turning around and heading back into the building. Looking at her departing back, Lu Benlai suddenly couldn't recall why they had broken up so easily back then. He didn't have the guts to ask her, so he tested her. When he found out that something really happened between her and another man, he ignored her. At the time, he blamed her and thought that she might not have any feelings for him. He was a little disheartened, but he couldn't bring himself to cut all ties with her. Then he struggled between love and not love, letting go, continuing or not continuing. It wasn't until she left and he couldn't find her anymore that he realized that he had lost the girl he chased after when he was young. If he hadn't tested her back then, if he hadn't harbored the thought of letting go of her, would they have never been separated? Would he have been able to be like Lin Jiege, accompanying Shi Yao from her school uniform to her wedding dress, all the way to Coco's birth? In the 2 months since Xia Shangzhou's resignation, Lin Jie hadn't met him even once. She knew that he was still in Beijing and he often met up with Lin Jiege. He was busy with his own business, but she wasn't too sure what his business was about, so she didn't ask Lin Jiege about it. Habit is the scariest thing in the world. She had never really believed in this saying, but in the past 2 months, she had truly experienced how difficult it was to get rid of a habit that had already been formed.